Welcome! This is the combined, complete Fallout DLC review and ranking video. In this video, I'll be combining all my previous Fallout DLC videos and then ranking all the DLCs against each other across all three games to determine the real, final DLC god of the modern Fallout series, all in one convenient place. I'll also be fixing a few mistakes I made in my past videos that several commenters have pointed out, as well as expanding on some points further. This is all just my opinion, so do not take these points and rankings as gospel. God help you if you do. And let me know how you'd rank any of these DLCs differently. It's always interesting to read the reasonings you guys give for your opinions on these expansions. But with that out of the way, I'll waste no more of your time and jump right into the Fallout 3 DLCs. Fallout 3. Good old Oblivion with guns. Love it or hate it, you can't deny its impact. I mean, without it, we don't get New Vegas, so I gotta give credit where it's due. This game took the smelly, fly-infested, rotting corpse of the Fallout series, resurrected it, changed the core foundations of the series, redefined what a Fallout game even is, and catapulted the series back into mainstream relevance almost immediately. Which is extremely impressive, as changing a game from a classic-style isometric CRPG to a first-person shooter action RPG and actually sticking the landing isn't easy. And since I've already reviewed and ranked the DLCs for New Vegas and Fallout 4, I decided that it would be again cool and fun to take a look at the Fallout 3 DLCs and round out the modern Fallout trifecta. For this video, I'll be going in order of release again, except for Broken Steel, which I'll go over first, as it's the most unique out of the 5 DLCs released. Yes, I made a mistake in my Fallout 4 video when I said,
both Fallout 3 and New Vegas had 4 expansions each,
because I'd forgotten that Fallout 3 actually had 5 DLCs instead of 4. Whoops! But that aside, let's not waste any more air, and let's take a look at the first expansion, Broken Steel. DLC number 1, Broken Steel. Broken Steel mostly exists as a fix for an issue of Fallout 3's, that being the fact that the player was unable to continue playing and exploring after the Activate Project period at the end of the main questline. As pre-Broken Steel, once you turn on the Purifier, your character assumedly dies from radiation exposure from the Purifier. But now, thanks to Broken Steel, instead of being reloaded back in front of the Purifier you just died in, you now wake up 2 weeks later in the Citadel's hospital. Quick side note though, Broken Steel only starts when you yourself turn the Purifier on. I tried to get Fox to say the classic line where he rejects you when you ask him to turn on the Purifier, and he cites destiny as the reason he can't go in and turn it on, despite him being a super mutant and fully immune to the deadly radiation blast the Purifier shoots out. Curiously, it seems Fox's dialogue has in fact been updated, and he will now actually go into the Purifier and turn it on when you ask him. He even takes a jab at the original line, saying that he would have thought it destiny, but since we changed his, he'll do it for us. Even Bethesda knew how ridiculous that ending was. But if you do that, that doesn't actually start Broken Steel, weirdly enough. Once Fox turns it on, the game just reloads you back at the Purifier, so you can go in and turn it on the right way this time. Anyway, we wake up to Elder Lion's 4K Ultra HD wrinkles, and he tells us that we've been out cold for about 2 weeks, and that the Purifier had been successfully turned on, with the Brotherhood of Steel hard at work handling bottling and distribution of the newly clean water. We also learned that even though we had spanked the Enclave at the Jefferson Memorial, they still pose a large threat to the Wasteland and need to be destroyed for good. Shit, they're still not done? Despite having their base blown up, their ChatGPT-powered president destroyed, their general dead, and a large number of their power-armored soldiers and vertibird fleet decimated in the battle for Project Purity, it seems they aren't ready to give up their water-poisoning dreams quite yet, and Lyons tasks us with helping the Brotherhood put them down for good, awarding us knighthood for our efforts. Kind of a crappy reward, but at least he's acknowledging us. So we head out to find Scribe Rothschild to plan our next move. Rothschild gives us a sweet PowerPoint presentation of movements the Enclave has made while we were out cold. We learn that the Enclave, despite suffering a decapitating strike to its leadership and suffering 2 consecutive crushing defeats, their command hierarchy has remained intact, and their communications are still in operation. Rothschild tells us that the transmissions have been tracked to a military base in the southwest, and we are to go meet up with Paladin Tristan, where we will assault the base with Liberty Prime from a collapsed car tunnel. After reaching the tunnel and linking up with the Brotherhood, we exit the tunnel to begin our assault on the base. For a game from 2008, this battle is pretty cinematic and bombastic, a lot like the assault on Project Purity from the end of the main questline. Liberty Prime leads the charge, lasering Enclave goons and chucking his nukes like footballs at them, all while spouting his pretty hilarious anti-communism lines. I've always been a big fan of Liberty Prime. He fits well into not only the technology of Fallout, but also the humor and satire of the series as well. And it's always funny to watch him call the Enclave communists, then huck a football at them like a quarterback.
Their play caller, Brian.
But also, like its Project Purity counterpart, this battle is much more spectacle than it is any actual engaging gameplay. Liberty Prime and the other Brotherhood of Steel soldiers make mincemeat out of the opposing Enclave soldiers real fast, and you the player can only usually get a handful of kills in before your allies completely obliterate them. But despite the assault going well, tragedy soon strikes. The Enclave call in an orbital strike on Liberty Prime, and in his last moments, Prime urges us to retreat from him before being destroyed in the orbital strike. He made the ultimate sacrifice. It died as a true patriot. I salute you as a true American, Prime. As for why the Enclave didn't call in an orbital strike on Liberty Prime during the battle for Project Purity, or drop an orbital strike on the Citadel at any given time, I'm not sure. Maybe the strike would have been too powerful or something and would have destroyed the Jefferson Memorial, or maybe they didn't get it working until after the battle for Project Purity or something. Whatever the reason, they really could have used it then is all I'm saying. But regardless, with Prime now gone, Tristan cracks the whip on us to go in the base and find out where they called in the orbital strike from. So we fight through a base full of Enclave troops, business as usual for Fallout 3, and retrieve data on the orbital strike from the base's mainframe, and return back to Rothschild to give him the data to examine. He tells us Lyons wants to speak with us again and is in disbelief that Liberty Prime has been destroyed, which I totally understand. I would be pissed if my epic patriotic mech got destroyed too. So we speak with Lyons, who's pretty shaken up by the loss of Liberty Prime, saying something along the lines of, "It's over. Liberty Prime has fallen. Millions must give up the fight." But I reassure him that everything will be fine because I'm just a beast and an absolutely elite Enclave Slayer, and he tells me to go link up with Tristan for a new assignment. We speak to Tristan again, who assigns us a mission to go fetch a Tesla coil from the old only sewers to develop a new weapon with. It seems he's sending us on a late game combat skill check, as I'm pretty sure old only is the most dangerous area in the base game of Fallout 3, as it's completely infested with Deathclaws. So I make my way north to Olney, and after searching the place for the sewer entrance, for some reason the map marker got moved to a metro station I passed down in DC and didn't actually point to the actual entrance of the Olney Power Works, so I had to spend some extra time and resources fighting off Deathclaws while I tried to find the entrance. I eventually find the entrance in an alley surrounded by dead bodies and miscellaneous flesh and gore, and enter the sewers. The sewers are more of the same as on the surface. You're just killing more Deathclaws, but now in a more confined space. Once we get through the sewers and chat up that guy from Twitter, we enter the only Power Works where we fight, you guessed it, more Deathclaws. And this section is the most Deathclaw-y of them all. I even had to bust out the Fat Man indoors to clean out a room that had 3 Deathclaws loitering around in it. This DLC does not play on the late game combat. We continue on and fight some more Enclave soldiers and a squad of sentry bots until we reach the heart of the Power Works and find the Tesla coil in an electrified pit with some pretty cool looking lightning effects shooting out of it. We pick up the Tesla coil with our bare fucking hands, youch, and return to the Citadel. Tristan tells us they have tracked the Enclave to Adams Air Force Base, and the only way to reach it is through the Presidential Metro Station. He also takes the coil from us and tells us it'll be used to make a Tesla cannon, a new heavy weapon that melts enemies with an electric blast. I make my way to the tunnel, and along the way get ambushed by Talon Company thugs who want me dead for being too nice of a guy or something. Who the hell am I ops with here? Satan himself? But I quickly pack them up and then head off to the Presidential Metro. This metro station is another challenging combat area, full of turrets, tanky Mr. Gutsy robots, sentry bots, feral ghouls, and most dangerous of them all, the newly added feral ghoul Reaver. Holy shit, the Reavers in Fallout 3 are jacked. They're spongier than Bob himself. Having a health pool on par with a Deathclaw, they can throw radioactive poop at you now for big damage, and they also hit like a truck. All that coupled with the extremely fast and jerky ghoul movements and the relatively small hitboxes make this enemy a fucking nightmare to deal with. I fear these things more than actual Deathclaws. These bastards had also sucked me dry of stim packs, which at least for me were pretty weak at restoring health, even with a maxed out medicine stat and having the fast metabolism perk. One stim pack only restored about 1/5 of my health, so I was hitting that pack pretty often. But thanks to my god tier gaming skills, and a little bit of shoddy programming, we take down the Reaver and hop on the train to the AAFB, complete with a train riding animation. Neat. I get off the train, fight a few more soldiers, and exit to Adams Air Force Base, which is a pretty sizable, impressive looking area. Although it's still pretty linear, as many areas are blocked off by Enclave force fields. The best comparison I can make is that it's pretty similar to Hopeville and Lonesome Road. I pilfer the supply cache that the Brotherhood had left me, which includes the newly built Tesla cannon, which is an absolute beast of a weapon. It fires a large electric blast that deals massive damage and deals even more electricity damage over time, and it only uses 1 electron charge ammo per shot, and I had thousands of rounds shoved into my back pocket. And it's an absolute lifesaver for the Adams Air Force Base, as this area may be the longest and toughest battle in the entire game. The base is huge and infested with tough Enclave soldiers, and turrets are peppered all over the buildings. The difficulty was compounded even more by the fact that I had burned through all my stim packs to get here, so that Tesla cannon is pretty much essential. But I forgot to use it. I was too caught up in trying to survive the first part of the base, and didn't even whip that shit out until later in the quest. Probably would have saved me some time and deaths, but ah well, my bad. But once we take out or run by the Enclave troops, we enter their true base of operations, a fully functional base crawler. Impressive technology. Inside we fight some Sigma males and even more Enclave goons, and the crawler is a pretty large and labyrinthian building, and it's pretty visually interesting with contrasting blue and amber colors throughout the base. We also run into a guy named Stiggs, a mechanic employed by the Enclave. I'm pretty sure he's the only Enclave-aligned NPC who doesn't immediately try to kill us on sight, and we can actually talk to him to learn more about the facility. Unfortunately though, Stiggs doesn't really have anything interesting to say about the Enclave, nor can we learn any new info about them from him. And him being the only NPC in the Enclave we can actually talk to is pretty disappointing. This DLC had the potential to give us some interesting stories and characters from the Enclave, and maybe we could have learned more about the goals of the people in it. But since this is Bethesda, they usually prefer to stay in the shallow end of the lore pool. We don't even get a new Enclave commander to duel with or anything. The Enclave is apparently just Stiggs and 30,000 unnamed power armor clad soldiers. After talking with Stiggs, we head upstairs and clear out the area. This area being a pretty dense and interesting area to explore. I'd even gotten lost trying to open the door to the roof, and actually using the Tesla cannon made things go much smoother in combat. I eventually find my way and open the door and get on the roof, and even with the Tesla cannon, it was a pretty tough fight up here. Enclave troops drop in from vertibirds and attack you from all angles, and I was getting spanked a little bit. But I eventually make it through and enter the heart of the crawler base, where I access the mainframe and target the crawler with the orbital strike. At this point, you can either target the Enclave base or one of the Capital Wasteland settlements, which is essentially a do you want to be good or evil choice, as all the settlements available for targeting are friendly settlements, so the choice is pretty shallow. It's a more binary version of the Helios 1 quest in Fallout New Vegas. And we escape the base where a now conscious Sarah Lyons picks us up for a sweet vertibird ride. We land away from the base and watch it get hammered by the orbital strike in a bombastic display. And with that, we take another vertibird ride back to the Citadel and complete Broken Steel. I feel like Broken Steel is a pretty good atomization of Fallout 3 at large. It has tight, engaging combat that feels pretty intense and challenging, and has some pretty great spectacle to it. Battling alongside Liberty Prime, fighting through the massive Adams Air Force Base and Enclave crawler, and watching it blown to Kingdom Come via orbital strike was pretty impressive for a 2008 game. But besides the engaging combat and the spectacle, Broken Steel falls pretty flat in pretty much all other aspects. The story builds off of the not great Fallout 3 main questline, which means the issues from that story translate here. The Enclave are still just one-dimensional bad guys, and the only non-openly hostile NPC from the faction being Stiggs was pretty disappointing. Broken Steel could have gone a long way in giving the Enclave and its soldiers some more depth and lore. I mean, this is their last hurrah, but they're just here to take another spanking in the end. Even the Brotherhood aren't even that interesting. Owen Lyons just sits in the Citadel feeling anxious all day. Sarah Lyons only shows up at the very end to save us and report that she isn't in fact dead. And Paladin Tristan just exists to bark orders at us. This expansion also doesn't do too much outside of being an endgame combat gauntlet. All the missions require you to mow down dozens of enemies, and there are almost no choices or role-playing opportunities to make. It plays more like Fallout of Duty 3 instead of an actual Fallout game, if that makes sense. Broken Steel also adds 3 side quests to the overworld that all revolve around the effect having clean drinkable water has had on the Capital Wasteland, and the various complications that it may cause. To start these quests, you go talk to the hilariously overworked Scribe Bigsley at the now functional Jefferson Memorial, whose character model looks so tired and sickly from all the hours at his new post-apocalyptic bureaucratic desk job. Seriously, bro is gangrenous. We offer him some help, and he points us towards helping water caravans out of Rivet City that are being attacked, and Megaton's water shipments getting used up mysteriously quickly. The Rivet City quest is pretty straightforward. Go talk to the officer, go to the caravan's location, which has already been attacked, and on the body of a bandit, we can find a note from the gang's leader, Split Jack, who we learn is planning to attack caravans for their water so often that the caravans will have no choice but to surrender their water to his gang and be forced to pay them a protection racket. Pretty simple stuff in all honesty. Luckily for us though, that note we found also contains a full docks on the gang's base of operations, so we head on over to Wilhelm's Wharf. Upon arriving, we can speak with Split Jack to either convince him to stop the attacks, join up with the gang, or kill him. It appears that if you join his gang, nothing triggers to actually go raiding with the gang, making it essentially pointless outside of the metal armor he gives you, and to complete the quest, even after joining, you'll either have to kill him or convince him to leave. So I split Jack's, well, you know, and return to the relevant authorities to complete the quest. It's definitely the weakest of the 3, being a simple bandit extermination job. The next quest is much more interesting. After arriving in Megaton to investigate the missing water, an NPC hands us a pamphlet advertising holy water from an upstart religion called the Apostles of Eternal Light, an offshoot of the Children of Adam who seem to be in possession of suspiciously large amounts of water. So we head on over to their church, which is the basement of a blown up house. Some pretty modest digs. We speak to their doorman, Brother Gerard, who gives us a bottle of the advertised holy water, which we drink and learn is just water that's been irradiated. We need to get to the bottom of this, but Gerard won't let us into the church unless we are irradiated enough. So I take a quick trip to Vault 87 to get a Kamehameha blast of cancer right into my nutsack so Gerard can let me in. Once inside, we find the leader of the church, Mother Curie III, and we speak to her to get the full picture. We learn through some pretty cheeky dialogue with her that the apostles have been taking the Aqua Pura shipments, irradiating the absolute shit out of it, and then giving it away as holy water in an attempt to irradiate the local populace and eventually turn them into ghouls, as these guys seemingly revere ghoulification, which is a pretty interesting development from the base Children of Adam cult. And it makes more sense that ghoulification would be worshipped over just plain old tumor-inducing radiation that Confessor Cromwell rambles about. Despite my requests, Curie refuses to stop her water poisoning racket, so I was forced to perform some religious persecution. And after wiping out the church and some ghouls they had locked up in their basement, we return to Bigsley to get the final quest. After passing a check, we get Bigsley to reveal to us that he's been dealing some water on the side for some extra caps, and that he's been selling a bunch of water to a ghoul named Griffin, and that he's been peddling it in the ghoul settlement underworld. Unsure as to why a radiation-immune ghoul is buying up barrels and barrels of purified, unirradiated water, we head on over to Underworld to investigate. When we enter Underworld, we find Griffin on a makeshift stage, trying to sell something he calls Aqua Cura to some ghouls. Griffin regales the audience with dubious claims that his Aqua Cura is a miracle substance that can cure any ailment, and with hair like that, how can you not trust him? Well, this smooth skin doesn't. We confront Griffin and ask him about his Aqua Cura, which Griffin claims has a secret ingredient added to it that makes it a miracle medicine. So I buy a bottle off of him for 10 caps, and taking a look at it with my Pip-Boy reveals that the water is irradiated. Damn, scammed again. I press Griffin and he reveals that he's got a hustle going where he sells the clean water to humans, and then just rebottles the Aqua Cura with normal, irradiated cancer water. This guy would have made a killing in the crypto scene. We return to Bigsley to learn more about his business with Griffin, and he tells us that when he sells Griffin the water, they just deliver it to the Museum Authority building at the National Mall, so off we go to investigate. At the Authority, we find it guarded by some luscious-headed ghouls, and we also find where Griffin is running his Aqua Cura rebottling scam out of, and we return to Underworld to confront him. I force him to tell the truth to his buyers, and they fly into a rage and start shooting at Griffin. Griffin ran off into the adjacent room, and when I followed him to watch the chaos, I got attacked by feral ghouls and had to fend them off, which made the ghoul buyers turn hostile on me, which ended predictably. So maybe I should have let things be with Griffin, as revealing the scam left all 5 involved dead. My bad, guys. Although fairly brief, these side quests are pretty enjoyable and play around with a lot of fun ideas that introducing free clean water to all may cause, which does a lot for world building and making the wasteland feel dynamic. Although these quests could have benefited from a bit of expansion to role-playing options, such as maybe even joining in on Griffin's scheme, or actually being able to fight alongside the water bandits. But overall, 2 of the 3 quests here are some gems. But with that, we can move on to the next expansion, Operation Anchorage. DLC number 2, we got Operation Anchorage. Operation Anchorage starts when you listen in on the Brotherhood Outcast distress signal, which is requesting support on their location. The Brotherhood Outcasts are a splinter faction of the Capital Wastelands Brotherhood, who had broken off from them after they had become disillusioned with Elder Lion's priorities shifting from securing pre-war technology and maintaining the Brotherhood's traditional isolationist stances to becoming a sort of benevolent police force of the Capital Wasteland, who are more focused on killing mutants and protecting Wastelanders. This shift in mission priorities led many Brotherhood hardliners to believe that these changes would eventually destroy the Brotherhood, as too many lives and resources will be lost culling the seemingly endless mutant hordes, so they broke away and formed their own edgier Brotherhood, with a cool dark red color scheme instead of the lame good guy gray that the regular Brotherhood are sporting. This is a pretty interesting setup for a potential conflict that directly comments on the Brotherhood's new and controversial role in the series, but the game doesn't go anywhere with this conflict, and neither does this DLC, so don't get too excited. And by the time Fallout 4 drops and the Brotherhood roll back around, this schism was solved off screen by Elder Maxon anyway, so I guess it didn't really matter at all. Regardless, we meet up with the source of the transmission, an outcast paladin named Moril. He begrudgingly allows us to tag along, and we fight through some cheese mutants until we reach their outpost. Moril sees that we have a Pip-Boy on our wrist that can interface with a simulation pod they found, yet we're unable to operate due to a lack of a compatible interface with the pod. Until we stroll in with a Pip-Boy on our wrist. But that begs the question, could the Outcasts not find one working Pip-Boy? Are they that rare? That's a whole can of lore worms we can't get into right now though. So anyway, we meet with the Outcasts, who are all pricks to us. Protector McGraw gives us a rundown on the Anchorage simulation, and tells us that if we complete it, it'll unlock a weapons cache. Now properly motivated, we put on our simulation jammies and enter the Anchorage simulation, starting the DLC in earnest. Operation Anchorage on the surface is a super cool concept. The Battle of Anchorage is probably the most important conflict before the Great War started, so it's super dope to see it in action. But, since this is a simulation, things are pretty different from the normal game. Enemies now phase out of existence when killed, and they cannot be looted. You can only loot weapons placed in the world that glow a pulsating red and make a droning sound like neuron roots when close, with only a select number of weapons available for use, those being the 10mm pistol and SMG, the assault rifle, both normal and Chinese type, the missile launcher, the sniper rifle, the Gauss rifle, and that's about it. The same goes for health and ammo, which can be replenished at health and ammo receptacles. The mechanics of Fallout 3 have been completely stripped back to make way for a completely combat-focused expansion. This is some real Fallout of Duty 3 gameplay. It's a very interesting choice for Bethesda to make a DLC that's carried by the gunplay and shooting mechanics of Fallout 3. And the results can be pretty airy. The story for this DLC is practically non-existent, as you're just going through various battle scenarios while getting orders barked at you. The first section of this DLC is pretty visually interesting though. You fight along large snowy cliffs and canyons, fighting Chinese soldiers and fighting through cliffside bases and caverns. Our first goal is to destroy the large artillery guns located at the top of the cliffs, and destroying them is pretty straightforward. Just walk to the back of the gun, interact with the large glowing box on the back of it to strap a bomb to it, and stand back until it blows up. Rinse and repeat 2 more times, and don't stand too close. All the while fighting 10,000 faceless Chinese soldier NPCs. The Chinese soldiers come in 2 forms, a more generic soldier and a stealth suit equipped soldier. The stealth suits look really dope and allow their wearer to turn invisible, which usually just makes the combat more annoying than anything, because the ripple from the invisibility is still easy enough to see and shoot at, but the enemies can't be targeted in VATS when invisible, so you just gotta spray at them with Fallout 3's dubious hit detection. Once those artillery guns are cooked, the game teleports you out of the cliffs to General Chase's camp, where he briefs you on the next step of your mission. We have to destroy a listening post, a tank depot, and disable a minefield so we can reach the oil refinery the Chinese are using as a base. We also unlock the ability to request loadouts and squads to help us in this mission, which is done through a clunky-ass terminal. The squad building was touted as one of the primary features of the DLC, but in practice it's just a pretty simple mechanic that lets you select which friendly NPCs will team up with you in battle. You get 5 points to spend on allies, who cost 1 to 4 points to recruit. I recruited a 4-point sentry bot to help me take on the listening post, where he promptly got blown the fuck up. Damn. That's kind of a good representation of the squad system in this DLC. At best, it'll provide a bit of extra firepower, but you're still going to be mostly doing the heavy lifting yourself. Also, besides picking your squad and telling them where to go via dialogue, you don't have any other extra control over them. Plus, the only squad mate I really need is Ben Montgomery here. He's essential and won't get killed. He's the perfect soldier. These next missions are more the same as before, with the only difference being the difficulty, which takes a solid jump, as the enemies are more numerous and have much more range on you, and your health is going to get chewed up a lot by snipers, with limited range options to counter them. You have to take some hit points closing in the gap to kill them. We continue playing Fallout of Duty. We destroy the listening post and Chimera tank depot, even fighting one of the Chimera tanks, which are funny looking snow tanks that move with corkscrew cylinders instead of treads. Once those are destroyed, we can link up with a squad of power-armored soldiers, and there's a cool little moment where a reporter takes a picture of some posing Marines. That picture being the origin of the Anchorage Memorial statue we find in the base game, which is a cool little touch. We then disable the mine pulse field, which conveniently is deactivated from our side of the minefield, and we assault the oil refinery. After we enter, we're locked in place and watch General Jing Wei flashily execute a soldier with his sword, then he turns to us. If you pass the speech check, you can convince him to commit suicide with just 1 sentence, which is pretty damn hilarious. But I failed that check and had to duke it out with him. From this fight, I can assume Jing Wei was given the title of general for his incredible resistance to bullets. Even several Gauss rifle blasts to the face doesn't faze this guy. I had actually run out of ammo fighting him and had to blast his kneecaps off with a missile launcher to take him down for good. This interaction with Jing Wei is the only real time the simulation aspect of the DLC is used in a fun way. Jingwei's over-the-top dialogue and the ability to have him stab himself with just one line is pretty funny, and it fits perfectly with what propaganda the US would have put in the simulation. Outside of this instance though, the simulation only really exists to justify the more constricted mechanics of this DLC. Even just having the generic Chinese soldiers say crazier things would have gone a long way for this DLC. But regardless, when Jingwei dies, General Chase appears before us to announce the end of the simulation, and we jack out of it. With the simulation complete, we can now open the armory to get the real prize of this DLC, a sweet suit of winterized T-51B power armor. On top of just being a sweet looking suit, its condition also never seems to go down, and in a game where armor condition decays pretty quickly, this thing is a god tier item. Once we've pilfered the reward room, two of the outcasts, Sibley and McGraw, begin arguing, and eventually open fire on each other, which surprised me as I was walking by and NPCs just started popping off at each other. After killing the mutineers, the only NPC left alive was that rude-ass specialist Olin, so I blasted her ears off to keep things consistent. After saying bye to Maril on the way out, Operation Anchorage is now complete. Overall, Operation Anchorage is a pretty weak package. It plays like a mid-mission in a mid-Call of Duty game. There's even 10 collectible intel briefcases you can pick up throughout it. Fallout of Duty is in full control here. So unless you really enjoy Fallout 3's combat, do they even make those kinds of people? You won't get much of anything out of this DLC. Outside of the interesting concept and location, as well as the winterized T-51B power armor reward and a cool few moments, you'd have a much better time just playing the cliffhanger mission from Modern Warfare 2. The story is basic to downright non-existent, and stripping back Fallout 3's base mechanics to make a more streamlined shooter experience does way more harm for the game than good. But with that, we can move on to a more meaty expansion, The Pit. DLC number 3, The Pit. The Pit takes us out of the green-tinted diarrhea landscape of the Capital Wasteland to the orange-tinted diarrhea ruins of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. To get there, we need to follow another radio signal, classic, and meet up with a guy named Werner. Werner tells us he's an escaped slave from a place called The Pit, and that he needs an outsider's help in freeing the slaves from their raider overlords. He tells us to go to a nearby slaver camp to get a slave outfit that we could use to sneak into the pit with. So I go there, and when I get there, the slavers recognize me as the guy who shot up Paradise Falls, which I indeed did, and attacked me on sight, which was a nice little detail. I kill the slavers, get a slave outfit, and Werner jump scares me, saying he followed me here. With disguise in hand, we return to the tunnel and make our way towards the pit. Now's a good time to go over the lore and the background of the pit. Like I mentioned, the pit is the ruins of Pittsburgh, a city known for its metalworking and steel industry. The pit was not only heavily bombarded with nukes during the Great War, but the pre-existing pollution from the steel production facilities mixed with the radiation to make the pit an absolute biohazard of a city. This extreme pollution casts a brownish-orange smog over the entire city, and prolonged exposure to the pollution in the city, coupled with almost 200 years of no Steelers football, has caused the pit's inhabitants to develop troglodyte degeneration contagion, a mysterious disease that causes people to lose their minds and denigrate into impish mutant creatures known as trogs, short for troglodyte, that infest the city like rats and attack the humans who haven't evolved yet. The city is also full of wild men, people whose minds have been destroyed and rotted by the pollution in the TDC, and attack you on sight. 30 years before the pit takes place, the pit was a chaotic hellhole, and the Brotherhood of Steel, when passing through it, was so disgusted by the violence and hopelessness of the place, decided to do a little ethnic cleansing. Total Yinzer death. Owen Lyons must have been a Ravens fan or something, and they swept through the city in one night, killing anything and anyone that was hostile, or could be hostile. Their only loss was an initiate named Asher, who had been left behind after he had gotten caught in a collapsing building and was assumed dead. When we enter the pit, we learn that Asher had survived the collapse, and over the last 30 years had built up a society of raiders and slaves to run the pit, as the pit still contained a steel factory that was still in operation, allowing for the manufacturing of weapons, bullets, and armors, a massive prize in a post-nuclear world. And when we arrive, Asher has an iron grip on the city, but he also may have a cure for the troglodyte degeneration contagion, which would be a game changer for the pit and its denizens. When we reach the pit, we fight off a few raiders and wild men, and we approach the bridge that connects to the city, and the pit makes a great first impression. The ruins of Pittsburgh look awesome. The orangish brown tint gives the place a real nasty and industrial vibe, and the wrecked bridge full of cars that were desperately trying to escape the city and strung up corpses and jury-rigged metal scaffolding make for an awesome entrance. This DLC is great at feeling filthy. The air looks polluted and heavy, all the NPCs from the pit have dirty, cracked, and peeling faces, and Bethesda did a really good job with the presentation of this place, and it still stands out from other Fallout series locations to this day. I pull up to the pit's front gate in full power armor, disregarding Werner's slave disguise plan completely. Sorry bro, I enter the front gate and get whacked with metal sticks until I'm unconscious, and get enslaved anyway. I mean, my power armor should have been able to fend off these lowly raiders, but since I'm just such a class act, I let them beat me up so I could beat them at their own game. We're woken up by Medea, Werner's contact and fellow slave. We follow her to her house, and she tells us she has a plan to get us in front of Asher, and that a revolt has been brewing for a while, but we can't make a move on him yet. So Medea sends us out to collect steel ingots from the steel yard to help us blend in. So we head to the steel yard and do a quick walkthrough of the steel factory, which despite running like complete crap on my 3070 Ti GPU, is a pretty cool place. Molten steel buckets move overhead and flames and sparks fly out of steel cutting machines. It looks pretty dope. We talk to the steel yard doorman who's just jazzed about our upcoming death by troglodyte. We enter the steel yard and begin our search. The steel yard is where most of the actual gameplay of the pit occurs outside of the last quest. The steel yard is a fairly large explorable area that introduces us to the aforementioned trogs, where we catch glimpses of them when we enter, building some pretty solid tension. Once inside the steel yard, we see a slave trying to get a trog's attention behind a fence. John here tries to get the trog to recognize him as his brother, but Trog don't care and attacks and kills him, and I kill the trog in return. The trogs are pretty simple enemies, just running up and swiping at you to deal damage, but they're pretty numerous. Sometimes I had to fight like 4 or 5 of them at a time, and fighting them in the steel yard felt like a balanced challenge that's not only about combat, but also about resource management, as all your items were taken from you when you got enslaved. I collect my 10 ingots exactly and return to the factory. There's 100 total ingots to collect in the yard, so you can really comb and pilfer the place real deep if you want for some extra rewards. But you got me fucked up if you think I'm doing another tedious collectathon. I got my fill on that from Nuka World. We return with the ingots and we head back to Medea's house, where she tells us Asher is gathering people in the town square to announce the opening of the arena, a fighting pit for slaves where a slave can be freed if they defeat the gladiators of the arena. Not only that, but the winner also gets to meet with Asher in person at his base. Medea tasks us with winning the arena so we can get to Asher and steal his supposed cure. We exit her house and listen to Asher's speech. His speech seemed glitched for me though, and it sounded like he was simultaneously giving a different but quieter speech.
Victories in the struggle for freedom! Because yes, freedom is what we all work towards! To celebrate this struggle, I ask my loyal workers, who among you is prepared to fight for your...
Not sure what that was about. Asher boasts about the future prosperity of the pit that's definitely coming, guys, trust me, and asks if anyone wants to fight in the arena for their freedom. Medea volunteers us and we head down to the arena to throw down. The arena, also known as the crassly named The Hole, is a pretty short section of the DLC, involving 3 fights with some well-equipped but pretty weak enemies. The last fight being a one-on-one fight with some goober named Gruber, and from his corpse we can pick up a DLC unique weapon, a scoped and suppressed assault rifle, the Infiltrator. I really like the look of this gun, but since I'm not playing a stealth build, this weapon isn't doing me any favors. So shooting it outside of stealth isn't really any different than using the base assault rifle, which I would just use anyway. But with the arena fights cleared, we can finally get our gear back and access the raider-only uptown areas and Asher's base of operations, a large skyscraper called Haven. Right outside of Haven is a creepy as fuck statue of a tall, thin, chained down humanoid figure that's in a pretty painful looking stance, with flames billowing out next to it. This brutal art piece isn't exactly helping their image as misunderstood leaders with a vision for the pit's future. We enter and walk up to Asher's desk, where he's currently chatting with one of his lieutenants. Asher corrects his goon when he calls the slaves, instead calling them workers, which he hopes will boost slave morale and reduce hopelessness. Once he's done talking to his underling, we can finally speak to the architect of Pit's misery himself. We talk to Asher, who tells us he may have a cure for radiation, and reveals to us that Werner isn't all who he seemed. Werner wasn't a slave, but rather Asher's old right-hand man, and had tried to oust Asher, failed, got enslaved, came up with a plan for a revolt with Medea, and escaped the pit, where he then got in contact with us. But before we can speak about this any further, Asher gets a phone call that the slaves have begun revolting, and he scurries off to handle the situation, leaving us free to grab the cure. We enter Asher's lab and we find something unexpected. A cleanly dressed woman whose face isn't absolutely filthy. This is Asher's wife, Sandra, and the cure isn't any type of vaccine or medicine. It's actually a baby. The baby, whose name is Marie, apparently not only has a natural immunity to TDC, but also has immunity to all negative effects of radiation. How convenient. Although baby Marie is a promising start towards a cure for TDC, she's still a baby and must be experimented on very carefully, and due to this, cure development has been a slow go. It's here we can make our big choice for the DLC. Leave the baby or take her. Sadly, you cannot eat the baby. That was a meme. The Pit tries to make this decision as morally gray as possible, but in the end, I find the choice is still either just fairly good or fairly bad, instead of just the wholly good or wholly bad options the game usually throws at you. On one hand, if you take the baby and side with the slaves, Asher and his raiders are wiped out and the slaves are freed. Sure, Werner's dishonesty and true motives aren't good and he isn't trustworthy, but siding with him still puts a hard stop on slavery in the Pit and wipes out the thuggish and oppressive raiders. But that leaves the Pit's future uncertain and pretty much solely pinned on a successful cure being developed, which may be harder for slaves to pull off than a scientist. Whereas if you leave the baby and side with Asher, the cure's development is more likely to be successful, but you maintain the Pit's brutal slavery system that may never actually end. I decided to take the baby, as I still find it evil to maintain a system of slavery, no matter the circumstances. And even though the system that held Pit society together would end, it's still better overall for the slaves to have the freedom to try and survive their new city, instead of living and dying in brutal slavery where they'll eventually turn into a pot-bellied imp from years of breathing in HPV gas at your slave job. And since the story of the Pit never gets an end slide section that tells you how the player's actions affected the future of the world and characters, this is all just speculation. And I think it's safe to say no slavery is better than having slavery, even if a baby needs to get kidnapped for it to end. The Pit's story is very carefully written to not have a clear good option, and a case could be made for both sides as a few commenters have previously pointed out. But as previously mentioned, the story never gets a clear resolution and ending slides like the New Vegas DLCs do. So for now, I still stand by my choice to swipe the baby. I also found it disappointing how little we can actually talk to Asher and Werner, as Asher only gives some broad justifications to his slave society before he runs off. Also, these raiders are pricks, and I wanted to shoot their heads clean off their necks. So I swipe the baby, double tap Asher's wife, and fight my way out of Haven. We get outside, and raiders and slaves are fighting in the streets. We have to make our way back to Medea. I fight through the streets of the Pit, dropping raiders and frames left and right, and I make it to the steel factory, where Medea tells me to go link up with Werner in his hideout in the steel yard. I give Werner the baby and he reveals the last step in his plan, cutting the lights to Haven and Uptown so the Trogs can overrun it, as they apparently have an aversion to light. So we fight through some sewers and cap some Trogs, cut the power, and exit out in front of Haven, where Asher just happens to be loitering around. I chase him down and kill him for his clothes and make my escape, getting chased by a huge pack of Steelers fans. Don't mention what Ben Roethlisberger did in that bathroom in Pittsburgh. I'm kidding. But I'm serious. Get ready to dash, because there's a ton of these motherfuckers and they can move really fast. But I escape into the steel factory and head back to the downtown area. Werner catches up with me in the middle of a firefight and congratulates us for being the best errand boy ever. He gives us some rad cures that they got from baby experimentation and opens up the steel forge to be used to make ammo. A pretty sweet reward. And with that, the Pit is complete. Overall, the Pit is a very solid yet brief DLC package. The location of the Pit has a great design and tone. You can really feel the filth and hopelessness oozing from this place. And there are some pretty great visual moments in dense areas. It's incredibly immersive and intriguing, and most of the locations kept me interested in wanting to learn more. My issues with this DLC stem from how surprisingly brief it is. You could probably complete the whole story in under an hour if you know what you're doing, and the segmented design of the Pit works well for what it sets out to do, but I feel like if it was an open, contiguous space, it would have been even better to give cohesion to the world and open up new opportunities to learn more about each faction. The conflict between the raiders and slaves is an interesting concept on paper, and the lore and circumstances of the Pit are genuinely interesting. If they had dug more into it, such as more dialogue with NPCs like Asher and Werner, and maybe more side content from both factions to get a better idea of their motives and situations, we could be looking at a top 5 Fallout DLC here. But as it stands, like the rest of Fallout 3, the narrative and choices remain pretty surface level, with the main decision being be bad to bring good, which may eventually become bad, or be good to continue bad, but bad may turn into good. But we never get any resolutions on those ends, so it remains just an exercise in speculation. I also had some pretty rough performance issues, especially at the final battle/slave revolt. I'm not sure why it ran so poorly, but it probably boils down to Fallout 3's PC port being some dog ass and just how old the game is. I remember all that Games for Windows Live shit. But with that complete, it's time to move on to the 4th DLC, Point Lookout. DLC number 4, Point Lookout. Our 4th DLC, Point Lookout, starts when you approach the new riverboat landing location. When you arrive, you're approached by a woman named Catherine, who pleads with us to find her daughter Nadine, who had sailed to Point Lookout on the riverboat we're currently standing in front of. We talk to Tobar, the boat driver, and he tells us more about Point Lookout, trying to sell us on a trip to Point Lookout like a shyster salesman, which I'll get back to. We buy a ticket off of him for 360 caps, damn scalper. We hop on the cot and sail to Point Lookout. We then cut to the boat sailing into Point Lookout. Twangy, ominous music plays as we dock at the abandoned boardwalk, a green fog settling over the flat and wet landscape. It's a pretty great tone setter for this DLC, really setting up the mysterious and swampland vibes pretty well. We dock and talk to Tobar again, who notices smoke rising up from the Culvert Mansion, pointing us toward the main quest of the DLC like a beacon, literally. Once we got the spiel on the place from Tobar, we can strike out to begin the DLC in earnest. Point Lookout is the first and only Fallout 3 DLC that adds a new, completely open and contiguous area to explore, the titular ruins of Point Lookout State Park, located southeast of Washington, D.C., jutting out into the Chesapeake Bay, and is loosely based off of the real-world Point Lookout State Park. Point Lookout's map is split into two main sections, the coastal beaches and cliffs, and the interior swamplands, which are inhabited by mutated, inbred, cannibal swamp hicks, and a local unnamed tribe that worship the native punga fruit and its psychotropic effects it has when consumed. Along with these guys are your typical Fallout enemy fare, feral ghouls and mirelurks, which are now called swamplurks for the theme. The beaches aren't super interesting outside of the locations on it, like the Cathedral, Mansion, and Boardwalk, but the swamps have the creepiness factor jacked all the way up to 11. Beyond just the killer mutant inbreds that roam the swamps, creepy dolls can be seen hanging from trees, totems with severed heads and skulls are dotted all over the place, and the trees are dead, spindly, and twisted, and there's this constant bluish darkness that just hangs over the swamp at all times. The creepiness can be a little overdone at times, especially with the lynched baby girl dolls everywhere, but overall it works really well to create an atmosphere that's pretty unique for the Fallout universe. Who could forget such epic locations such as truck wreckage, a trash heap, and grower's shack? And that's coupled with the crisp sound design. The swamp sounds of frogs, crickets, and other bugs chattering and croaking in the background sound pretty on point, and do a lot for immersion and atmosphere when in the swamp areas of the map. Now that we have the lay of the land, let's go check out that commotion at the mansion. When we arrive at the mansion, a ghoul's voice, although quiet, can be heard asking us for help fighting off a group of local tribals that are attacking the mansion. Never one to pass on an opportunity to slaughter dozens of unwashed barbarians, we swoop in and join the fight. This first battle at the mansion is a pretty long one, tasking us with sweeping through both wings and all floors of the mansion, and fighting off several waves of these tribals, who seem to have odd scars all over their heads and bodies. I found this fight to be pretty engaging. Despite only wearing loose sackcloth robes and wielding rudimentary weapons, these tribals are pretty tough and can eat a few bullets, and some are equipped with some heavy-hitting weapons, like the DLC added lever action rifle and the double-barreled shotgun, and there's a ton of them, so you'd best be prepared for the scrap. I also really like how sometimes they'll ragdoll through barriers and bust in through doors. It's pretty funny to watch. I mow through these guys, collapse their entry points, fall through 3 floors, and return to the main foyer, where we make a final stand to the ghoul we talked to earlier, Desmond. The tribals break through the main foyer doors just to be cooked by me and Desmond, and once they're all dead, we can finally speak to him. Desmond barely thanks us, because he's an absolute prick. His dialogue is pretty funny. When you ask him questions about Point Lookout, he'll either dismiss your question by saying we wouldn't understand what's going on, or insults the thing we're asking about in a profanity-laden rant. Desmond has one of the best characterizations in all of Fallout 3, and he's pretty entertaining as an unabashed asshole who probably curses the most out of any other Fallout character. I think bro drops more fuck bombs than there are in the entire base game. Also, for a ghoul, he's got a sweet cut and mustache. Bro has not been slacking on the conditioner. Despite his standoffishness towards us, the guy who just slaughtered 24 tribal goons to save his life, solely out of the kindness of our hearts, Desmond probably needs us more than he's letting on, so he tasks us with infiltrating the tribals and figuring out why they want him in a box. So we head to the base of their operations, the Ark and Dove Cathedral. When we arrive at the cathedral, we are told via intercom that we won't be let in unless we complete something called the Mother Seed Ritual. So we trek and battle through the spooky ass swamp until we reach the ritual site. We fight some more through the ritual site, killing several swamp lurks along the way, until we reach a massive punga fruit. The punga fruit farts in our face, and we pass out from huffing that shit in. After getting back up, we start geeking real hard, and as you trek back, bobbleheads of special skills start popping up in the swamp with doomer messages. They must have gone on Twitter for 5 minutes or something. We also see this weird gesticulating red blob thing, inverted landscapes, giant needles and threads sewing up the ground, and a hallucination of our dead mother, and when we interact with it, it says, "Black, if my kid looked like that, I'd abandon it too." Jesus Christ, this punga fruit is fucking savage. We then see dead bodies of NPCs we met in the base game rise up from the swamp until we reach what appears to be Mr. Burke and the Megaton nuke. The bomb explodes and we wake up from our geek session. The hallucination sequence is short but effective, and it always gave me the heebie-jeebies as a kid when I played Fallout 3 on my now petrified Xbox 360. After waking up, we return to the cathedral and we are finally let in. We're greeted by the doorman Jimson, where we can get some more info about the tribe and its beliefs, which are pretty vague and surface level. All we really know about them is that they eat punga fruit to trip balls off of, and worship its hallucinogenic and healing effects. They also practice brain excision, and during the ritual we had our skull cracked open and a small part of our brain cut out, which the tribe believe expands the mind. We also learn that they have a leader simply known as Jackson, but he's not at home right now, and besides that, we don't really know much. The rest of what we can glean is essentially just vague ramblings about mind expansion in the astral plane. Nothing solid we can really understand or get examples of, which is unfortunate as it makes the tribe pretty shallow. Hell, they don't even have a name. They're just known as the Tribals, parentheses Point Lookout, on the Fallout wiki. From Jimson, we also get more info on why the Tribals attacked the mansion, telling us that Jackson had ordered the attack, but for reasons we do not know yet. So we head inside the cathedral, where we can see some Tribals plug walking around the cathedral off that punga goop, and we run into the girl we've been looking for, Nadine, who is seemingly shacked up with this tweaker tribe. Nadine tells us about how our skull has been cut into and a part of our brain has been nicked, leaving us with a nasty scar on our forehead. But not to worry, Nadine can remove the scar for us. It's always funny to see scar removed pop up, like a bodily injury is just a part of my inventory. We ask Nadine about Jackson's whereabouts, who tells us he's off in his magic prayer cave that only he can access. But luckily for us, Nadine had gotten a head start on her homework and had followed Jackson to his lair, and gives us the key to access it through a wrecked ship at the bottom of the cathedral's cliffs. How convenient! She also tells us to meet her at the boardwalk later to investigate who took our brain bits during the geek session. With this info in hand, we return to Desmond to report what we found. Desmond then promptly kicks us out to go find Jackson and berates me for wasting his time. Sorry bro, I'm just following the quest marker. So we do a 180 and head back to the cathedral, but not before Desmond flexes his age and experience on us. Such a funny guy. So I head into Jackson's sea cave using Nadine's key, and after a short scrap with some more swamp lurks, we can finally approach Jackson, who is gesticulating and tweaking while speaking to a projection of a brain through an odd device. From their conversation, we learn that the brain wants Desmond dead and a jammer destroyed so the brain can perform some, quote, psychic domination. All the while, Jackson wholly misinterprets the brain's commands as some sort of astral plane domination plan. By talking to Jackson, we learn that he leads the Tribals by taking orders from the brain hologram, believing these commands to be holy steps to enter the astral plane. Or something, it's kind of vague. Jackson is kind of stupid, and he's completely oblivious to what's actually going on and what the brain wants. The brain insults him to his face and rebukes his ideas that any of this has to do with an astral plane. So we speak to the brain to get the actual full picture. We ask him why he wants Desmond dead, and he, like Desmond, just shuts us down and tells us that we couldn't possibly understand his reasonings, and that all we need to know is that we need to destroy a jammer Desmond is using to block the brain's signals, which is preventing him from psychologically dominating all the locals using some sort of brain radio science method. Again, it's kind of vague. But we also learn that the brain and Desmond have a history together, so we return to Desmond to learn the truth. We return to Desmond, who seemingly has already gotten a brief on what happened in the cave. We also learn that the brain belongs to his old rival, Professor Calvert, a member of an influential pre-war family of the same name, who had survived the last 200 years as a disembodied brain in a tank, and Desmond had come to Point Lookout in search of him. Desmond then tasks us with jamming Calvert's broadcast by planting a jammer on the Ferris wheel in the boardwalk. When we arrive at the Ferris wheel, we get a message from Calvert directly into our brains telling us to side with him and to destroy the jammer. It's here that we can make our Fallout 3 patented this or that choice, and I usually almost always side with Desmond, as even though he's a dick, there's no real reason to side with Calvert at all, as he seems just wholly evil and has some insane ass plans to psychically dominate the surrounding area. And Calvert is just as big of a prick as Desmond is, so the only reason I could see for siding with Calvert is if you just want to be evil. So we go ahead and plant the jammer, and Calvert sics his tribal shooters on us, who we dispatch in a pretty cool boardwalk firefight. As we return to Desmond, the mansion gets blown up in a massive explosion that throws our player back, and we enter the safe room as debris from the explosion falls all around us. It's a pretty cool little detail. I'm not sure how Calvert triggered the failsafe explosion though. Maybe he used his psychic powers like a Pokemon to side-beam the failsafe on or something. We speak to Desmond in the safe room, who had tracked Calvert's location to underneath the Point Lookout lighthouse. Desmond is pissed and fiending to smoke that Calvert pack, so we head right on over. In the lighthouse, we enter through a hidden hatch into an underground lab facility. From terminal entries inside, we can learn that this place was a facility that was doing R&D on RoboBrain and brain extraction and preservation technology, until it was taken over by the Calvert family, where Professor Calvert eventually got his brain put into a tank and preserved. After a brief trip through the facility, we come face to face with Calvert's brain. Here we can make one last choice to side with Calvert or Desmond just by opening fire on the one we don't want to side with. Desmond will even wait patiently for you to make your choice instead of immediately just trying to kill Calvert like you think he'd would. They just stand there insulting each other back and forth until you make a move. I make the same choice again. Calvert didn't add any extra benefits or sound reasoning to join his side, even with his back completely against the wall. And when I ask for more info, he just dismisses me again and tells me I'm too stupid to understand their rivalry or something. Like, alright, whatever, bro. So I just smash his tank, and his brain plops onto the floor, vanquished. Desmond revels in his victory and reveals what he was really after, Calvert's research. Well, at least I think. He again tells us we're too dumb to understand what he actually wants, and tells us to fuck off. And with that, we pilfer the vault at the end of the facility, and that completes the main quest for Point Lookout. Despite some good characterization and some pretty entertaining quests, the main story of Point Lookout still feels like a missed opportunity. The setup of a story of two longtime rivals who had survived the Great War, one through brain extraction and one through ghoulification, has a lot of potential to have a sort of post-war political intrigue / special operations story. But it feels mostly shallow, as Desmond and Calvert refuse to actually talk specifically about why they actually hate each other, and will shut you down or dismiss you by saying something like, "Bah, you wouldn't understand the situation anyway," shit like that. It just feels cheap, and leaves the conflict at the heart of the story feeling shallow. Desmond is a selfish asshole, but all he really wants is Calvert's stuff, and Calvert is an actual mad scientist who wants to mind control people with psionic waves or something. It's not the most riveting stuff. But overall, the missions do a lot of work in making the main story fun and interesting throughout the missions and gameplay, even if the story is a bit underdeveloped. But that's not all to Point Lookout, as it has a handful of side quests, most notably the Black Hall Manor quest and the Chinese spy quest. The Black Hall Manor quest begins when you arrive at the swamp mansion of the same name. Inside we find a lone old man living in it, Obadiah Blackhall, who requests our help in retrieving a lost family book. He says the local swamp men have taken the book to a ritual site past the boardwalk, and offers us a rack of caps to get it back. Help this suspicious old man alone in a scary swamp manor find a book in a place called Ritual Site? Sounds legit. I'm in. When we leave the manor, we're greeted by a woman named Marcella, who warns us against giving Obadiah the book, and tells us the book is called the Krivbekne, and that the Blackhawks have been doing some real evil shit with it, and tells us to give it to her instead. So we head to the Ritual Site, which is a short but very interesting dungeon, as it's full of large, odd ruins that don't match the surface structures at all. We fight through some swamp mutants, and at the end of the dungeon we find an altar in the Krivbekne itself, a dark, spooky looking book with a large bloody gash on its cover. I decided to return it to Obadiah to see what would happen, and after giving him the book, he springs up out of his chair and immediately goes downstairs to reveal a secret altar room with a decapitated swamp man on it, and begins praying to the corpse. I tell him that he's above this disgusting display of demonic worship, and he calls me a troglodyte. Now, I can tolerate demonic eldritch worship, but I draw the line at being rude. So I laser his head clean off and take the book back, which I was very pleased to find out that you could actually do. So I head over to Marcella's camp to give her the book instead, but when I show up, I find her dead, as she was attacked and killed by smuggler thugs. From notes in her camp, we learn that the book ties back to the Dunwich building plotline in the base game of Fallout 3, and to take the book to the obelisk there to destroy it, which is a pretty cool tie-in with the base game, and a callback to the overarching Eldritch Lovecraftian subplot Fallout 3 and 4 build-up. It's a short but very interesting and unique quest, and I always enjoy Bethesda's cosmic horror subplots. They're big Lovecraft fans, and they handle the genre actually pretty well. The other standout side quest is the Chinese spy quest, where you can complete a Chinese spy's mission after finding the spy's corpse in the Boardwalk's motel. The quest will have you doing some pretty fun spy activities, such as finding dead drop locations, locating what happened to the previous spy. She died in a prison camp, if you wanted to know. Locate and blow up a derelict submarine, and punch in a secret code to access a safe room, where you eventually get betrayed on a 200-year delay before escaping. It's a very fun and interesting quest, and works well as a short but fun spy-themed adventure. Before we head back to the Capital Wasteland, we run into Nadine in front of the ferry. She tells us that it was Tobar the ferryman who had taken our brains this whole time, as he had worked out a deal with the tribals to perform the brain extraction in exchange for punga fruits to sell across the Capital Wasteland, and that she was holding him hostage in the ferry's cabin. So we confront him, and he's unrepentant about his actions, and for fucking with my dome, I just destroy his. That coupled with the absolute king's ransom he charges for a boat ticket, I'd say this is completely deserved. Earlier I mentioned how Tobar seemed pretty suspicious, and it turns out I have pretty good reason to think that. And his voice performance does a pretty good job of characterizing him as shifty and untrustworthy just through the performance alone. Nadine then takes command of the boat and gives us a free ride back to the Capital Wasteland, which completes Point Lookout for real. Point Lookout is another really solid DLC package. The main quest, despite being narratively weak, has some pretty engaging and interesting quests, and the new world of Point Lookout, although somewhat desolate and only having a handful of named NPCs, has some really solid theming and a decent amount of interesting locations, some more than others though, and as a setting, it still feels unique for a Fallout game, and having the world be a contiguous and fully open space, and not segmented or linear, does a lot for this DLC. The side quests here are also creative and interesting, and the newly added weapons such as the lever action rifle and the double-barreled shotgun work great with the DLC's aesthetics. I can't help but feel like I'm playing a prototype of Far Harbor with this though, but don't worry, that's a great DLC, and this is a pretty damn solid prototype. And with that, we can move on to the final DLC, Mothership Zeta. DLC number 5, Mothership Zeta. Remember in my New Vegas video when I said,
You then arrive in Zion, which is probably the most visually unique area out of any Fallout game.
yeah, I think when I was writing that, I totally forgot about this DLC. Mothership Zeta is by far the most out there and detached from the main Fallout locations as you can get, taking us to an actual alien spacecraft, building off of the long-running alien Easter eggs in the Fallout series. In Fallout 1, you could find a crashed alien ship, where one of the aliens has a picture of Elvis in his inventory. The DLC starts when you approach the downed UFO that's in the base game. It's the place where you can find the alien blaster. After approaching the UFO, you're suddenly abducted by a pretty cool looking tractor beam, and you get sucked up into, assumedly, Mothership Zeta. There's a brief cutscene where the aliens operate on you, calling back to the classic alien abduction and subsequent probing/surgery stories that you've probably heard. We then wake up in a cell with another wastelander named Soma, who tells us that we're currently held captive in an alien prison, but not to worry, Soma has a plan for our escape, which is to stage a fight to lure in the alien guards, where we'll then overpower them and escape. So we start throwing punches at each other and the plan goes off without a hitch. The guards come in to stop us and we viciously beat them to death and begin our escape. Mothership Zeta is very similar to Operation Anchorage, both being fairly linear, mostly combat-focused expansions. Yup, Fallout of Duty is back, but this time with a fresh alien theme. And that theming for the most part works pretty well. The new weapon designs are pretty interesting, albeit functionally no different than any normal human-made gun, besides the robot cannon, which launches an energy ball that explodes after a short time, having the player having to take physics into account when firing it. But the damage output is kind of weak for a heavy weapon. You're much better off just using the Alien Disintegrator, an alien-style rifle that does really solid damage and has a massive magazine of 100 shots. And to reload it, just give it a spank on the ass. This gun can pretty much carry you through the entire expansion. But you could also use the Alien Atomizer, a new pistol that's weaker than the original Alien Blaster, which you don't actually get to use until the end of the DLC. But the Atomizer uses the same ammo as the Disintegrator and just does less damage, so there's no real reason to not use the Disintegrator at all times. We continue on through the holding cells until we pass by a young girl in a cell, and she tells us to turn off the generator, which is done by pressing the main button to make it show up, then interacting with the 3 coolant tanks surrounding it and waiting for it to blow up. Once that's destroyed, we meet the real MVP of this DLC, Sally. Despite her appearance as a helpless young girl, she seemingly knows the entire layout of the ship and can crawl through small spaces and open inaccessible doors, and even leads us to the main engine room, where she tells us how to shut down all the generators in the 3 wings of the ship needed to open the way to the next level of the ship. How does she know all of this? Well, apparently, she was abducted shortly after the Great War and has been on the ship for around 200 years, but seemingly hasn't aged since then, so maybe the aliens had her in cold storage for a while. It's way too convenient that she knows this much about the ship, but the narrative of this expansion isn't its strong suit, to say the absolute least. I continue on some more, and get my gear back and head to the Steamworks. It's here that we really start fighting the enemies of the DLC, the little green men themselves, the Zayden aliens. They look like your typical pop culture alien, short, big round head, green skin, and big black eyes. Those eyes make them look like they're getting faded on some Zayden za. They fight using the aforementioned Atomizer, Disintegrator, and the Shock Batons. Some of them will have this rippling, starry looking energy shields that make them harder to kill, and it seems as the DLC goes on, the aliens get stronger by getting stronger shields. You also fight these very Star Wars-y looking robots, turrets, and these taller buffer aliens called Abominations, which through log entries appear to be alien-human hybrid creatures, some sort of alien experiment. You'll also occasionally run into non-hostile alien workers who flee from the player, and you'll actually lose karma if you kill them, which I find odd, as the aliens are pretty much wholly evil towards humans, performing grotesque experiments on them after abducting them from their homes and lives, either killing their human test subjects outright, or worse, and these workers are complicit in that. I always killed them when I saw them, which dropped my karma from very good to just neutral, just for being on some Space Marine shit. What the hell, man? Once we reach the central engine room, we free 4 NPCs from cryosleep: a samurai, a cowboy, a soldier from the US Army, and a dead astronaut. This is a pretty awesome narrative development, and there's a ton of potential here for interesting interactions and dialogue. But this is Fallout 3 we're playing, so it's sadly pretty surface level. The soldier we saved was abducted from the Battle of Anchorage, and there could have been a ton of opportunities for interesting dialogue telling him that the war ended in nuclear devastation, and the nation he was fighting for no longer exists. But you don't even get that option. Bro is more concerned with making better alien biogel than having an interesting conversation. But at least the upgraded biogel is pretty helpful. The cowboy, Paulson, doesn't fare much better either. Bro just straight up refuses to chat about most topics. The samurai is my favorite though. He only speaks in Japanese and has a pretty cool set of armor, and since you can't speak to him, he spends most of the DLC running off and doing his own thing. Fun fact, since he's from the Sengoku period of Japan, Toshiro here is canonically the oldest character in the entire Fallout series, being well over 700 years old. From here, we have to destroy 3 generators that are found in the Cryolab, the robot assembly plant, and the hangar. You can take one of the companions to each area for some extra dialogue and interactions, but they're not super important. The combat remains the same throughout the entire DLC, more Fallout of duty in space, but the designs and interactions of the areas work just enough to keep me from losing interest. There's a decent amount of stuff to see and interact with, especially in the Cryolab, as you can open up cryopods to release NPCs, creatures, and mutants throughout the facility. The hangar is the most confusing part of the ship, as it mostly involves interacting with a collection of buttons that trigger repulsor pylons that have a UFO floating within them. I'm not sure why it's set up like this. When you try to access the door to blow up the generator, a bunch of aliens will spawn on the other side of the room and run past the pylons, which you can use the buttons to kill the attacking aliens with. It has a weird flow and design to it, and having to walk past it to turn it on and wait for the aliens to assault you. But it's pretty funny to blast their limbs off and watch the ragdolls go flying from the repulsors. Once we've destroyed all 3 generators, we don the dead astronaut suit and spacewalk out to get to the next level of the ship. This DLC kinda hypes the spacewalk up, but in reality, it's just a short walk on top of the ship. You interact with a few raised power panels, and you're golden. No need to worry about floating off into the vast emptiness of space. It seems gravity still works outside of the ship. We then enter the second level and teleport all my chums onto the next floor with me. We reach an observation deck where we can look down at the Earth that is tinted a yucky green, just like the base game, and has a massive glowing spot on its surface. I wonder what that's about. It's here where I ran into a game-breaking bug where Sally and the rest of the NPCs got stuck on the observation deck, and she refused to move to go into the crawl space nearby to open the door. So I had a console command the door open to continue, which is not a super big deal, but it seemingly broke Sally's dialogue until the end of the DLC, so I may have missed out on some extra story and important dialogue. But I highly doubt it. The second deck of the ship is still more of the same, blasting aliens and robots in enclosed spaces. But now we're scrapping with the Abomination aliens, whose designs I really like. The expressionless faces and the way they just point at you when spotted makes them pretty freaky to look at. And they have some decent lore to them from the captives logs we get from alien terminals. All these recordings are pretty great, some having pretty funny characters reacting to their abductions, and some having pretty harrowing recordings of people being viciously maimed and experimented on, and the voice acting on these recordings are really well done, and they're all really fun to listen to. I eventually stumble into the Death Ray room, which you can actually point at and shoot the Earth with, but this doesn't actually appear to do anything back in the overworld, so maybe it's a remnant of some cut content or something along those lines. Because we destroy the Death Ray in this room, but at the end of the DLC, we use the Death Ray to fight against the enemy ship in the final battle, and it seems perfectly functional there. If I had to guess, the Death Ray probably played a bigger role in early stages of development, and maybe you could make an evil choice to blast the Earth with the Death Ray, which would cause some sort of change in the overworld, like a settlement getting destroyed or something similar. But who knows? After destroying the Death Ray, I continue towards the bridge and take on the captain of the ship, who I kill in one shot to the back of the dome before he can even get out of his captain's chair. Oof, it's a tough break. Once the aliens on the bridge are dead, I teleport the rest of my crew to the cockpit, and we get a transmission from an alien hologram before another ship flies out in front of us. We then have to engage it in space combat. Fucking sweet, right? Wrong! This space battle is very disappointing, being a glorified version of that nonsensical puzzle you have to do in Skyrim to get the Elder Scroll from Blackreach. You fight using only 3 buttons, which will either set your ship to have full shields and low laser, mid shield and mid laser, or low shield and full laser. I wasn't sure what the strategy was supposed to be, but the power routing buttons can be pressed without any cooldown, so I would set laser to full, shoot it, then set shield to full and wait for the other ship to fire back, and rinse and repeat until the other ship is cooked. Once the ship is destroyed, that concludes Mothership Zeta. The NPCs you helped will be thankful, but they don't have much to do beyond this point. They will either just stay on the ship, or ditch you and vanish into the wasteland, never to be seen again. I'm not sure how Sally's story ends, as she seemingly vanished from the cockpit as soon as the battle was over. So I take the teleporter back to the capital wasteland, and our main reward is a unique alien blaster called the Captain's Sidearm, that shoots out multiple alien blasts at once. It's alright. You can also return to the mothership at any time, but it's kinda pointless as the NPCs don't have much to say to you, and most of the ship is just inaccessible. Overall, Mothership Zeta's design, areas, and unique setting really save it from being another Operation Anchorage for me. The story is very basic and disappointing. It has some good ideas and interesting developments, but they don't really go anywhere interesting, and we don't learn anything about the Zetan aliens. We don't know anything about their motives, goals, or society, and we come out of it only knowing a small bit more than we knew going in. The combat is pretty basic, just shooting up aliens and robots all day, the disintegrator being more than enough for any situation the DLC throws at you. And some of the mechanics like the hanger repulsors in the final battle aren't very well communicated to the player. Your enjoyment will come down to how well you like Fallout 3's combat, and how much you enjoy the alien setting, which does work pretty well, despite the pretty mediocre gameplay. And with that, that's all the Fallout 3 DLCs complete. Time to move on to our next and most beloved game, Fallout New Vegas. I started this by asking my followers one simple question: which Fallout New Vegas DLC is the best in your opinion? And the answers were, just like any other time this question is asked, mixed. Ask any person who's played Fallout New Vegas what their favorite DLC is, and you'll probably get a different answer each time. And I think that really reflects the quality of these expansions. It's not very common for a game to not only have a fully realized core experience, along with 4 high-quality DLC add-ons that introduce new areas, characters, weapons, and stories to discover these days. So I thought it'd be cool and fun to play through and rank all these DLCs, as it had been a while since I last played them, and when I did play them back in the day as a young lad on my now fossilized Xbox 360. Most of the themes and stories of these DLCs went way over my head anyway, so today, I'll be ranking these DLCs from worst to best. Don't worry, these are all good expansions in my opinion. I could glaze this game and its expansions for days. This is just a competition between them to see who is the best. I'll go through each add-on in order of release, that's Dead Money, to Honest Hearts, to Old World Blues, to Lonesome Road. Some may argue for swapping Dead Money and playing Honest Hearts first due to Dead Money sharing an overarching story with the other DLCs, while Honest Hearts remains mostly separate from the others. But for simplicity's sake and consistency with the developers, I'll just go by order of release. After looking over all the expansions, I'll then rank them to determine which is the true DLC god of the pack. These are all my opinion, so don't take any of these rankings seriously as doctrine. Let's get this shit. DLC number 1, Dead Shmoney. The first and by far most controversial of the group is the first expansion released for New Vegas, Dead Money. Ask anyone who's played it, and they'll either tell you they love the unique gameplay, deep and tragic story, and interesting characters, or they'll tell you they absolutely hate the spongy enemies, brutal traps and hazards, and unorthodox game design. Who's telling the truth here? Well, is the DLC shit or not? Let's get into it. After answering the call of a mysterious radio broadcast advertising the opening of a casino where you can let go and begin again, you'll be hearing these phrases often, Dead Money sees our courier incapacitated, kidnapped, and shipped off to the Sierra Madre, a massive opulent casino and resort complex situated near the Grand Canyon. Built by old world businessman Frederick Sinclair shortly before the bombs dropped, the Sierra Madre was installed with technological wonders such as the one of the 2 new enemy types, the holograms, as well as special vending machines that can use Sierra Madre themed poker chips to fabricate items such as food, medicine, clothes, and weapons from the materials in the chips, making the Madre fully self-sufficient. However, in order to obtain these technologies in the first place, old Frederick had to make a few shady deals with the creators of the technology themselves, the R&D defense contractor Big Empty. Big Empty is a very important entity not only in the DLCs, but also in the base game, with creatures like the Cazadors, which are roided up killer wasps, fuck these things, and the Night Stalkers, dogs with large grafted rattlesnake heads and tails, fuck these things too, being created by the Big Empty, but we'll get more into that in Old World Blues. With old Freddy allowing them to use the Sierra Madre complex to field test technologies such as the Cloud, a corrosive toxic gas that appears as a misty red hepatitis cloud that now engulfs the Madre, along with a hazmat suit designed specifically for the Cloud, which unfortunately for Sinclair were shit at their one job, with the Cloud corroding the metal locks on the suits, trapping the workers inside of them. With further exposure to the Cloud causing their skin and flesh to merge and fuse together with the suit, denigrating them into the new enemy type, the shambling ghost people we see plug walking throughout the desolate villa. Despite these troubles, along with other financial issues with construction on the villa area, Sinclair continued building his casino, as he knew nuclear war with China was inevitable, so going broke wasn't an issue for him, as money wouldn't matter after the bombs dropped and killed everyone who was using it as currency. Along with the futuristic technology, he had also designed the Sierra Madre to be a fortress that could withstand the nuclear apocalypse. His true goal with the casino being to protect the love of his life and the voice of the Sierra Madre broadcast, old world movie star Vera Keyes. If nuclear war were to happen, the casino would hermetically seal shut, the security holograms would activate, and the survivors would all be safe inside to wait out the fallout, using their vending machines and stockpiles to sustain themselves. However, something went wrong when the nukes started dropping. Sinclair went missing, the security holograms went berserk, killing all the guests within the casino, and the cloud had started seeping out from within the cheap ventilation systems and eventually covered the entire complex, keeping it preserved for the next 200 years. And that's where we start this DLC. After waking up, we are greeted by this flickering projection of an old man. This is Father Elijah, a brilliant but cruel and a bit cracked out former Brotherhood of Steel elder who we heard about in the base game. Elijah had led his Brotherhood chapter to capture and occupy the solar power plant Helios 1 in an attempt to harness the power of Archimedes 2, a giant satellite experimental death ray weapon from before the war. Easier said than done though, as the NCR, whom the Brotherhood was currently at war with, also wanted to take Helios to use as a source of much needed energy for the local NCR military operations in the Mojave. The Brotherhood of Steel and NCR fought each other for control of Helios, with the Brotherhood slowly losing ground to the endlessly attacking NCR troops. With time running out and Elijah still unable to activate and use the Archimedes 2 death ray, he abandoned his chapter and escaped into the night in search of alternative technologies that could destroy his dreaded NCR ops with, eventually leading him here to the Sierra Madre. After waking you, Elijah tells you he's got you by the balls and that he's got plans for you. He's planning a heist of the Sierra Madre's vault, and he needs your help along with 3 others in order to pull it off properly, as the Sierra Madre is locked up tighter than femcel pussy and requires a team of people and a specific sequence of actions to get inside. In order to force you into compliance, Elijah has strapped a bomb collar to your neck and to the necks of your teammates, and if one goes off, everyone dies. This bomb collar being a major aspect of Dead Money's gameplay. Elijah warns you of the dangers of the Sierra Madre, like the previously mentioned hepatitis cloud, the ghost people, the holograms, and the most vile of them all, the radios. You see, the collars were designed to detonate when they receive a certain frequency, and the Madre is littered with old radios and speakers that just so happen to be emitting a frequency that can set the collars off. And if you're too close to a radio for too long, head go boom. And Elijah was unable to fix this issue. Thanks for nothing, asshole. So with our tasks received and warnings issued, we can finally get to work. Dead Money strips you down to start. To begin, you're only given a hollow rifle to defend yourself with. Dead Money is definitely the most unique DLC of the pack, as its gameplay is very different in both approach and pace compared to the base game. Dead Money takes the Fallout mechanics and repackages it into a survival horror-esque experience. Weapons, ammo, and healing supplies are limited, forcing the player to scrounge as much as they can for any supplies and Sierra Madre chips strewn about the nightmarish villa, and to be mindful of your own resources in each enemy encounter. Dead Money makes a great first impression. The cramped maze-like villa paired with the dark red air surrounding you makes the atmosphere feel downright oppressive, with the monolithic Sierra Madre casino looming over you at all times. They were taking good notes from Silent Hill on this one. You'll find yourself exploring and looting the villa as much as you can, and this introduction works great to really set the game's hooks into you. As you head for your first teammate, you'll run into one of the new enemy types, the aforementioned Ghost People. The Ghost People appear to be zombies, mindlessly shambling through the villa until provoked. When they engage you in combat, they jump and jerk around at lightning quick speeds, making them very hard to hit in the heat of battle, and they attack you just as fast, swiping and lunging at you in animations that have less frames than when I was trying to play Overworld Blues with my CPU melting down. I'll explain later. Not only that, but the Ghost People can also throw large gas bombs and throwing spears at you as well, making them both close and range threats. Especially the gas bomb throwers. Holy hell, these guys can be devastating if you aren't careful. The Ghost People force you to approach each enemy encounter with a plan of attack, and serve very well as a survival horror type enemy. Finally, when you manage to knock a ghost down, that doesn't mean it's over. Ghost People can only be killed if one of their extremities are crippled or destroyed, and will quickly get back up if not dealt with. An interesting idea and concept, having to brutalize your enemy to fully kill them, but luckily for us, these guys are pretty brittle. Knock them down with the hollow rifle and then pull out a melee weapon and quarter them while they're down. Simple as. Sometimes if you get a crippling or critical shot on them, it destroys the body part of the ghost before they lose all their health, allowing you to kill them earlier. I've only had a few occasions where they would get back up, but that was usually limited to dealing with multiple ghost enemies at once, and even then it's still pretty manageable. Arriving at our destination introduces the new radio mechanic to the player. Stand within range of the radio and your collar will start to beep. Stay in range too long and your dome gets blown. Exit the radio range and the timer ends and resets. Radios can either take the form of the standing radios you can interact with to turn off, or wall-mounted radios that can either be destroyed with a projectile, or are marked red and have to be shut off via terminal. I'm a bit torn on the radio mechanic. I love the absolute ass-clenching tension it can bring when you're hurriedly moving through the corridors looking for the source or a safe spot, but at the same time, I've had more than a few annoying deaths with the radios, and it can very easily just evolve into a trial and error run to find the source, and the tension gets lost because of that. Also, this is just a personal nitpick, but I absolutely hate the "your caller started/stopped beeping" alert messages you get. The messages linger for way too long, and they quickly fall behind the current beeping status. You can run through an active radio area, and your caller can start and stop beeping in the time it takes for the first message to go away. This could be fixed by having the message appear at the same time the caller starts or stops beeping, and having it overwrite the current message. But as it stands in game, ignore the message pop-ups and only listen to the beeping to determine your current status, as the messages will only confuse you. Here we also meet one of our 3 teammates, Dog and God. He is a Nightkin, which are schizophrenic super mutants with dark purple skin, and has split personalities. Dog, his violent beast-like side that takes orders from his master Elijah, and God, his intelligent and rational side that wants out of his arrangement with Elijah. After clearing out the police station, you can either choose to free Dog or God, each offering you a different perk. Each of the companions offer you a perk when they're with you that provide a buff against one of the new mechanics of dead money. Dog will devour downed ghost people, making them easier to kill, and God will prevent the player from triggering traps as well as giving you a stealth bonus. God's stealth perk sort of negates itself due to the fact that he's programmed to bum rush the closest enemy, but the invulnerability to traps is still a very helpful perk, as I was getting fucked up by these bear traps more than I thought I would. These damn ankle biters are everywhere in the villa, so the mileage you get out of one perk or the other will depend on your playstyle, and whether you prefer Dog's combat buffs, which are amazing for the early game, and saving you tons of health and ammo as Dog does all the real work of slaughtering ghosts, or God's trap invulnerability, which could save you from some painful moments that I experienced later on in the expansion. Also, whoever you take out of the cell does affect God's ending, and to get the best ending, you'll want to choose God so he can take control at the end, as although he's a bit of a sardonic prick, he's light years better than the ravenous, sycophantic, cannibal murderer that Dog is. I like God. He's got a fittingly freaky look to him, and having him by your side gives you a nice feeling of security in this otherwise brutal place. And his split personality is handled really well, giving us 2 characters for the price of 1. With Dog collected, our next crewmate to find is the old lounge singer Dean Domino, whose posters you've probably seen throughout the base game and on the loading screens, so it's really cool to meet this character in person. On the way to find Dean, you'll have your first encounter with the Cloud, which you'll have to wade through in order to reach him. The Cloud, despite having a decent amount of lore setting it up as more than just a toxic gas, is in practice just a toxic gas. Stand in it, lose health, simple as. It's nothing you haven't seen before. You'll also begin to run into more and more traps, with pressure plates, bear traps, and tripwires strewn everywhere, forcing you to watch your steps carefully. You will get fucked if you try to ignore them. I made this mistake. I heard that. Get away from there, Dog. What the? Jesus Christ. These traps don't play around. The explosive traps especially, they seem to have been juiced up for this expansion, as they can melt your health and cripple you from pretty solid distances. The bear traps were the worst traps for me though. I've died to these fucking bear traps an embarrassing number of times, and their placements are straight up devilish. Very blind looking. Dude, what? But after a bit of trial and error, as well as watching my steps, we reach Dean. Dean is far and away the most interesting NPC in this expansion, as his story ties in directly with that of the Madres. Dean has been at the Sierra Madre since at least 2077, being present for the Great War and the downfall of the casino. And for about 204 years, he has been living amongst the ghosts and traps of the Madre, and breathing in the all-surrounding hepatitis gas for that long probably isn't that good for you. And when you finally meet him, he isn't what you thought he'd be like. Dean isn't the cool and friendly lounge singer that he portrays himself as. He's a vindictive, arrogant thug. The first thing he tells you is that he's got a bomb under your ass that he isn't afraid to blow up, and later on, in order to get his, quote, good ending, you have to play along and glaze him to make him think he's in control of the situation. But I'll talk more about this later. We recruit Dean and head for our final crewmate, Christine Royce. By this time, you'll probably have collected a bunch of Sierra Madre chips. These chips are used in the vending machines, this DLC's store system. To start out, you can only make fairly inconsequential purchases, such as pretty useless food or clothes, but you can find holotapes throughout the DLC that unlock more useful items such as chems and, more importantly, stim packs. I mostly use these vending machines solely for stim packs, and only occasionally to convert cigarette tins into chips for, you guessed it, more stim packs. This stim pack tape is located in the clinic, along with Christine and the second new enemy type, the security holograms, the evil version of the other holograms we've seen at the fountain and some other spots in the villa so far. The holograms are a sort of enemy trap hybrid. They cannot be physically damaged and can only be defeated by turning off their emitters with a repair skill check or just destroying them outright with damage. These checks aren't easy either. They get harder as you progress through the Madre, and towards the end of the DLC you'll have to have a repair level of 100 to disable the holograms. And since shooting the emitters accomplishes the same goal, just shooting them is always the better solution. Since they can't be harmed physically, and their lasers do massive damage, hologram encounters are always stealth based. Since they are holograms, they can only see in front of them, so sneaking by them isn't really based on your actual sneak skill, which is nice for those of us who don't level sneak in Fallout New Vegas often. These holograms, like most of the other traps in this game, can be both hit or miss depending on the context. The first encounter with one in the clinic is actually very good, showing you how to manipulate their positions via terminal and how to neutralize the emitter while avoiding line of sight is tense and rewarding. However, later on, as they pop up more and more, they start feeling less and less threatening. You can oftentimes just blow right by them with some quick movements, as they struggle to follow you around corners or past obstacles. They're pretty sedentary. It's here in the clinic that we finally meet our third and final crewmate, Christine, who has been shoved into an autodock pod and has been rendered mute and scarred by its operations on her. It's definitely an interesting idea to have Christine be non-verbal and have to signal and sign to communicate, with all of her speech options being descriptions of her movements and subtle signs. But in execution it falls flat, as you read about all the actions and subtle movements she's doing to communicate with you, all the while her model on screen just stands there doing the mannequin challenge. A bit awkward for sure, but nothing I can't forgive is just a limitation of the engine. We collect Christine and return to the fountain with the whole squad assembled. We return to Elijah's floating mugshot, and he tells us that in order to get into the casino, we need to trigger something called the Gala event, which requires the help of all the 3 misfits we have just collected, and we now have to bring them to their designated spots in order to trigger it. This part is sort of an inverse of the first part of this DLC. We first went out to collect the characters, now we gotta go put them back in their correct spots. This section of the DLC is an extension of the first part, having to deal with more enemies and traps as we move deeper into the villa. This part is where I believe Dead Money strikes its best balance. The ghost people become more numerous, but you also have more options for dealing with them, such as having other weapons besides the holo rifle like pistols, throwing spears, and gas bombs. There are more places to explore, but exploration is dangerous and can lead you to losing massive chunks of health if you aren't careful. I was getting shredded by bear traps. You can make a compilation of me getting wrecked by these fucking things. These ghost people have impeccable troll trap placement abilities. I also found myself spending almost all of my Madre trips that I had scrounged from containers and fountains buying up stim packs, and I ended up getting just enough to make it through this part. It was tense and engaging, and probably where Dead Money shines brightest, at least gameplay wise. So we lead all our companions to their spots, they bitch and moan about it, we placate them, then we kick off the Gala event, following some interesting technical difficulties. 14 health. Oh, or that could happen. Or this can happen. Alright. We head back to the plaza, dodging and offing some ghost people along the way, and into the newly opened casino. We walk into the casino, get knocked out, wake up, and learn that all of our companions have also been brought into the casino. How convenient. However, Elijah tells us that before we can get into the vault of the Sierra Madre, we have to deal with all 3 of them first. This is the third and final part of the DLC involving our companions, and this is where we can determine their endings. After turning the power back on and dodging some holograms, losing a little bit of time along the way, we move to deal with Dog first. Dog and God are fighting for control of their body, and Dog has locked himself in the Sierra Madre's kitchen and has also busted open a bunch of gas valves, filling the kitchen with flammable gas that would burn down the entire casino if ignited, which is exactly what Dog will do if he spots you, so be careful. We trap him in dialogue so he doesn't ISIS our ass, and with some silver-tongued Riz, we get Dog to calm down and go to sleep, and let God take control, concluding his story. Although Dog and God don't have the richest backstory, I ended up really liking this character. He fits perfectly into the themes and the setting of the DLC, and he was compelling enough to make me want to help him out and give him the best ending possible. 1 down, 2 to go. Up next, Dean Domino in the Tampico Theater. Moving through to the theater to get Dean is where unfortunately the traps and hazards start to reach their breaking point, from tense survival situations to trial and error annoyances in my opinion. In order to get to Dean, we have to activate a hologram of his performance while dodging security holograms and radio signals at the same time, and I wasted more than a few minutes getting my head blown off by the radios searching for the path forward. Within the Tampico Theater are indestructible radios visible all along the walls, which confuse me as to where is safe and where isn't safe. Turns out if you stand in the middle of the theater, that's far enough away from the radios to be safe, but being able to see them all along the walls was throwing me off. In any case, we activate a music stand, get a key, Dean jump scares us from backstage, and tells us the way forward. We move through the dressing rooms, dealing with more radios along the way, which were a tad more annoying than engaging unfortunately, dodge some holograms and fire up the Dean concert to clear them out. Then we finally speak to Dean. Dean's ending will be entirely dependent on how the player treated him when they first met in the villa. If you pass the barter skill check with him, that'll automatically lock you into a bad ending, as Dean will try to kill you at this point due to him being suspicious of you. Luckily for me, I missed this check and was able to actually speak with him and learn some more information about what went down at this casino over 200 years ago. Dean tells us that he had cooked up a scheme with Vera Keys to rob Sinclair's vault in the depths of the Madre and to completely break his heart by having Vera be complicit in this scheme. Dean even personally introduced Vera to Sinclair, feeling his obsession with her. Why did Dean want to completely destroy this man both financially and emotionally? Because, according to Dean, he was arrogant. Apparently. Dean thinks that Sinclair thought that he was better than him and had constructed the Sierra Madre as a monument to his fat ego and arrogance and a big middle finger to guys like Dean. Which says way more about Dean than it does Sinclair. However, the heist failed when Vera, overburdened with guilt, confessed to Sinclair and told him everything about the plot, which kicked off the Madre's true downfall. Dean is vindictive and jealous to the point of psychopathy, and has spent the last 200 years living in this hellscape fueled only by his spite and his never-ending coping and seething over his failed revenge heist. In my opinion, the best and most fitting ending for Dean would be for him to die at the hands of the courier, unable to let go, see what I did there, of his rage and greed, finally falling to someone that he had underestimated. But in this playthrough, I kept him alive, which allows him to finally leave the Madre and begin again. Did it again. Which may be for better or for worse. We also learned from Dean that he was the one who had put Christine in the Autodoc pod and had done so in order to operate on her vocal cords so that her voice matched Vera's voice. This is because the only way to access the vault is through an elevator in Vera's room, and the elevator can only be accessed with a code spoken by Vera. So off we go to the suites to meet with Christine and finally get into the vault. Now's a good time to explain the rest of the story of the Madre and what actually happened the day the bombs fell. Before her confession, Sinclair had found out about the plot to hit a lick on his ass, so in a rage, he started making modifications to his vault. He had redesigned it to become a trap, and if Dean and Vera were to get into the vault, it would have permanently sealed them inside of it, condemning them to die an ironic death amongst the treasures of the vault. However, after Vera's confession, Sinclair was devastated, but didn't want Vera to die. So he returned to the vault in an attempt to undo the booby trapping he did to it, but tragically stubbed his toe or something whilst walking along the pipes near the vault, fell, and died from the poisonous hepatitis gas that had seeped in from the shitty ventilation system, with his corpse remaining sealed near the vault in the depths of the Madre. After this happened, the holograms began slaughtering the guests, and Vera, unable to cope with the situation, overdosed on Med-X and died with the rest of the casino, writing her final message, "Let go," on the wall of her room. God damn, that's heavy. Back to the game. We travel to the suites to find Christine and do some more radio and hologram dodging, having to avoid the hologram of Vera Keys, who constantly repeats her last moments alive, pleading with a long-gone Sinclair and lamenting her betrayal of him, which is just extremely eerie and depressing. In theory. The corridors and rooms of the suites are very small and cramped, making it very easy for the hologram to spot you, and as a terrible stealth player, this eerie moment loses a lot of impact when you're listening to it over and over again while running and panicking from the Vera hologram after your cover gets blown. Minus these antics after you get spotted, this is an otherwise excellent moment in the DLC. Her room has these sweet looking red windows and the atmosphere is just palpable. It's really well done. In Vera's room, we meet up with Christine, who can talk again. With this newfound power, we learn that she is a member of the Brotherhood of Steel and has pursued Elijah in order to kill him, not only as her orders, but also as a personal vendetta against him from separating her from her lesbian lover Veronica. She also does some teasing for later DLCs. But we talk her down and get her to let go of her lust for revenge against Elijah and to let us handle it, and we use her new Vera voice to unlock the elevator and get to the final section of the DLC. Christine is probably the weakest of the characters in this DLC, as she doesn't speak for most of it, and she only has 2 possible endings depending on whether if you were nice or mean to her, and it's probably the easiest good ending to get. But overall, her place in the story is still very interesting, and I do like the effort the devs put in to have a mostly silent character, and still have her be mostly compelling and effective. After that, we get into the vault area, and it's here where they save the most devious traps for last. The radios are everywhere and the holograms are patrolling all over, and my head was getting liquefied pretty often in my last hour of gameplay. By this time, the radios had fully lost any tension, and had just become a sort of trial and error puzzle where I was parkouring around to beat the radio timers. The holograms didn't fare much better, as after trying to sneak past them to get to the required terminals to open the path forward, I eventually just started blowing past the holograms to get around. As if one sees you, but you're able to round a corner or get behind a wall, they don't move much to pursue you. I began to not fear them at all, just running by them as I tried to get to the vault. After digging around and not realizing that the force field was controlled by a terminal option hidden within another terminal option, some negative IQ gameplay here, we finally get into the vault. The vault was probably the most famous part of the DLC, and for good reason. I see why Dean wanted to hit a lick on this place so bad. On top of tons of ammunition, on a table are 36 gold bars worth 10,547 caps each. Shit, son. But we will get back to those. For now, we call down Elijah with some Riz action, and when he arrives, you can either pack his ass or sneak around him and seal him in the vault in an ultimate act of irony. Me and my chat tried to sneak past him, but I couldn't get it to work, as it seems to be pretty finicky and you'll need a sneak skill of 100 to make it work effectively. Apparently there is a stealth boy in the vault that can help with this, but I couldn't find it for the life of me. And I ended up just killing Elijah after a quick scuffle. After his death, a countdown triggers and you have to run all the way back to the entrance before your head goes boom. Time to grab those gold bars, and they weigh 35 pounds each. Shit! And if you try to take all the gold bars, the over-encumbrance would make escaping impossible. Very, very cheeky, devs. In these last moments of the DLC, the devs also force the player to do a little letting go, and forcing them to accept that they cannot take all this shmoney with them, a moment I absolutely love, although you can cheese this by looting Elijah's corpse through a wall, or loading up all the gold bars onto a part of his body and then carrying it all the way to the exit. But these are all completely unintentional. And with 4 gold bars in my back pocket, we make our escape and complete Dead Money. Overall, Dead Money is a really solid start to these DLCs. The unique design of the DLC really distinguishes it from the others, for better or for worse. I'd say the new hazards and design choices are effective 70% of the time, with the other 30% being when the hazards just become more of an annoyance than anything else, and begin to feel more like trial and error puzzles rather than tense survival situations. Besides these design hiccups, the atmosphere is oppressive and tells one of the most solemn and engrossing stories in the entire Fallout franchise that's still highly regarded today. And with that, we move on to DLC number 2, Honest Hearts. DLC number 2, Honest Hearts. I feel like Honest Hearts is the odd one out of these DLCs. Dead Money, Old World Blues, and Lonesome Road all share an overarching plot and characters that reference each other in each DLC, whereas Honest Hearts is mostly removed from that overarching story and is pretty much wholly self-contained. Honest Hearts also returns to the open world design of the base game that we are all familiar with, this time taking us to the fairly untouched paradise of Zion National Park. It's time to get honest. Honest Hearts starts with the courier answering a call for curious travelers to join the Happy Trails Caravan, a trading caravan that is set to travel to Zion to try and re-establish contact with their trading partner, the Mormon-ran settlement of New Canaan. After speaking with Jed Masterson about the job and speaking with Ricky, a great little NPC who has some pretty funny dialogue and speech checks you can roast him with, I stripped down to 100 pounds of carry weight, as the DLC forces you to only be carrying 75 pounds, which can be raised to 100 with a few checks. This forces your character to be a little short of resources when you arrive, but don't worry, the DLCs get less and less restrictive as we go along. And with my courier less encumbered, we strike out towards Zion. Now we learn a little bit more backstory about New Canaan from Jed, along with legends of the Burned Man. When Caesar's Legion was starting out in Arizona, Caesar had a right-hand man, his Malpais legate, a New Canaanite named Joshua Graham. New Canaan was a Mormon-led settlement near the former Salt Lake City, and Joshua was raised as a man of faith. Josh and Caesar were tearing up Arizona, conquering tribes and bringing them into the Legion fold. During these campaigns, Joshua Graham gained a ferocious reputation as a brutal commander and a stone-cold killer, committing atrocities against the tribes the Legion was beginning to steamroll over in their conquests, which flew directly in the face of his pious and peaceful beliefs, making him a complicated and conflicted man. This conquering continued until the Legion ran into the new California Republic as they expanded west into the Mojave, culminating in the First Battle of Hoover Dam, where Joshua made his first and last mistake, when the NCR was able to draw his most experienced legionaries into Boulder City, where the NCR had laid a trap, destroying the Malpais legate's troops with explosives planted throughout the town. With the bulk of his army shredded and thrown into chaos, the NCR forced Joshua back over the dam in a convincing defeat. Caesar was proper fuming, unable to accept failure, even from his longtime partner and legate of his armies. Caesar had Joshua doused in pitch, lit on fire, and thrown into the Grand Canyon in a display of ultimate disapproval. Despite being lit on fire and being essentially thrown off of a skyscraper, Joshua had survived the incident. He must have been spamming stimpaks on the way down. He crawled out of the Grand Canyon and walked an arduous 400 miles back home to New Canaan, oozing skin and having to constantly replace his full body bandages along the way. Not long after, the legend of the Burned Man had begun to spread around the wasteland, haunting Caesar as an echo of his greatest failure, banning any mention of his name or his new alias as the Burned Man. We then arrive in Zion, which is probably the most visually unique area out of any Fallout game. I really like the idea of having a Fallout setting take place in a national park, and it's a nice departure from the usual piss-filtered concrete diarrhea that we see for 90% of the base game. Although it's not totally perfect, as the graphics of Zion haven't aged the best. But I can forgive a 13-year-old game for missing the mark on one of the most naturally beautiful places on Earth. And as far as we're concerned, it gets the job done well. Very shortly after arriving in Zion, shit starts getting pretty hairy. Tribal raiders from the White Legs tribe begin attacking our caravan, and poor Jed and Ricky's heads pop off like balloons from the gunfire. I think their heads are literally scripted to explode, insta-killing them. Damn, it's a raw deal for an NPC. We push through and fight off the White Leg attackers until we meet a friendly tribal, a young buck named Follows Chalk. He belongs to the Dead Horses tribe, who are led by Joshua Graham, who they revere as a great leader. We follow Chalk, you could say, and we get a better lay of the land. I like Follows Chalk as a companion. His voice acting is actually really well done. He comes off as a bit nervous yet very personable and helpful, just through the performance alone. We continue following Chalk until we reach their camp, and after checking in with two bears high-fiving and zukaing...
Auslander Zuka Joshua Graham?
What? We can finally meet the man himself, Joshua Graham, who is endlessly working on and inspecting and reloading an unchanging pile of pistols. Looks like that might take him a while. From speaking with Joshua, we learn that these attacking White Legs have destroyed New Canaan under Caesar's orders. The warlike White Legs desperately want to join the Legion, and Caesar, seeing an opportunity to rid himself of his greatest mistake once and for all, made a deal with them that if they could destroy New Canaan and kill Joshua Graham for good, they'd be allowed to join the Legion. Which explains their presence in Zion, as many of the survivors of New Canaan had fled to Zion to seek help from Joshua, who was working with and leading the Dead Horses by then. Joshua says he can help us leave Zion if we can help him first, a classic video game transaction. Joshua and another New Canaanite, Daniel, are currently trying to evacuate the tribals and survivors out of Zion Canyon, and they need some supplies to pull this off, such as a compass, food, and walkie-talkies. So we get to work. This is the point in which, unfortunately, this expansion starts to fall flat. The quests given to you by Joshua are fetch quests in their purest form, tasking you with going to the marked location, finding the item in question, picking it up, and that's it. No extra steps or rigmarole to get the items. They're that easily accessible. Pick up the compass, pass an easy repair check or fix with spare parts, quest complete. Go to the fishing lodge, get a key, get the walkie-talkies, quest complete. Go to the ranger station, pick up the marked lunchboxes, quest complete. I'm hard-pressed to call these quests, and if you even rolled them all into one quest, it's still extremely simple. All the skill checks needed to complete the quest are pretty easy too, being around level 30 to pass the relevant medicine and repair checks. Anyway, with the supplies in hand, we head to meet with Daniel and the other friendly tribe in Zion, the Sorrows. We meet first with the other companion this DLC introduces, Waking Cloud. Although she's not as interesting as Follows Chalk, I find her character to be genuine enough to still be somewhat appealing, behind some more good voice acting and writing. Waking Cloud also tells us a bit about her tribe, and that they worship a father in the caves, that I'll circle back to. But for now, we talk to Daniel, who tasks us with getting a map of the Grand Staircase region, as well as fending off the White Legs and their traps. We pick up Waking Cloud on the way out, and after downloading a mod to fix an issue with Joshua not talking to me... Yeah, come to me, bro, come here. Okay, Oh, Josh, bro, you're fucking glitched. What's wrong with you?
Welcome back.
We speak to him after he came running for us. He recites a goated Bible verse and then tells us about his take on the current situation. Joshua came all this way to the Sorrows camp because he has decided that he wants to fight off the White Legs and defend Zion, rather than retreat. This flies in the face of Daniel's position, who wants to evacuate the Sorrows and others out of Zion to preserve their innocence and to avoid bloodshed at all costs. The game presents both sides here to give us some time to make a choice on the issue while we're doing our quests. This second round of quests, despite being a bit more in-depth, also fail to impress. They involve you either killing a few White Legs, disarming traps in a specified location, or killing Yao Guai bears and blowing up their cave after a short walkthrough. The only real notable quest involves getting the Grand Staircase map and leads you through a cave that once belonged to a lone survivor, and on his terminal we can find some interesting logs. This is the father of the caves that the Sorrows worship, and his story is an absolute gem, providing some much needed development for the Sorrows tribe. As the White Legs and Dead Horses have almost nothing going for them, at least lore-wise, with the Dead Horses being a mostly peaceful but combat-capable tribe, and the White Legs just being essentially raiders. The father in the caves is the Survivalist, a man named Randall Clark, an ex-soldier and outdoorsman who had taken refuge in Zion after the bombs fell, and you can find his story scattered across terminals in the caves of Zion. His story is incredibly well written and engaging, detailing Randall's struggles surviving the initial bombings, his struggles with the death of his family and survivor's guilt, the subsequent fallout and weather disasters, his one-man war against an invading group of Vault 22 dwellers, as well as guardianship of a group of children who had wandered into Zion, those children eventually becoming the Saros tribe, with them revering Randall as their god, yet fearing the caves and buildings he lived in, as Randall had booby-trapped them out the ass in his conflict with the Vault dwellers, and the Saros had gotten spooked after one of their tribe members had died setting off one of his traps. The Saros marking the places as taboo that we could see decorating the caves and building entrances across Zion. His story scattered across the caves provides the main reason to explore Zion as you uncover more and more of his tragic tale, and you can actually find his corpse in a sweet DLC unique weapon called the Survivalist Rifle. I fucking love this gun, and his story. Rest easy, Randall. After completing Daniel's chores, I did the Rite of Passage quest. A fairly simple yet entertaining quest to defeat a Yao Guai while tripping balls on Datura. It's a pretty fun quest. Having your courier fight a giant mutated bear that's on fire and can make clones of itself always makes for good fun. We kill the ghost of She, and then it's time to make my choice on who to side with and begin the final stage of the quest. Yes, it's already at its apex. And the choice is pretty easy in my opinion. Joshua is obviously the better choice. I can understand Daniel's desire to avoid bloodshed and keep the Saros away from war, but I think bro needs to take a step back and look at the bigger picture. The Fallout world is a dangerous place, and the Saros will eventually have to fight to some degree. Not only that, Daniel has already lost his home of New Canaan to the Whitelegs, and at some point he'll have to stop running. Even though the Whitelegs wouldn't be able to pursue the Saros into the Grand Staircase, who knows if they'd run into other dangers or enemies. Hell, even their deity wants them to fight. In his final message on his body, Randall Clark writes about how he wants the kids to be kind, yet fight back with righteous fury if they're attacked or threatened. Although they may lose their innocence and become more warlike in the process of fighting back, it still seems to be the better solution in almost every case. So we tell Daniel we're gonna help Joshua out, and he bitches and moans at us for a bit, but he ain't shit compared to Chadshua Gotham. We then load into a battle with Joshua as our companion, who gives us a pretty sweet perk that makes 45 caliber pistols do more damage and be more accurate, which is much needed against the Whiteleg goons we're slaughtering. The Whitelegs, despite being homeless raiders, are pretty well strapped, holding many high level and high caliber weapons, and these guys will be tearing up your ass, so this perk is a huge buff. This section serves as a sort of end DLC combat gauntlet, forcing you to fight your way across Zion to the Whitelegs camp, mowing them down like fucking Master Chief. When you get close to the Whitelegs camp, Joshua forces you into dialogue and then disappears out of existence, and we don't see him again until the final sequence of the game. I think we need some man-ass in the game.
This is taking too long. We can't let Saltapon wounds escape. I'm going to find a way around. God willing, we will finish this together.
Alhamdulillah. Oh, okay. Bro just slipped into another dimension. See ya. We fight through a short cave until we re-link up with Joshua in the final scene of the game. Joshua had slipped out of this dimension to go cut off the Whitelegs' retreat, and now has taken them prisoner. He summarily executes some of the Whitelegs before turning to their leader, Saltapon Wounds. From here you can either convince Joshua to kill him, spare him, or kill him yourself, with your choice determining Joshua's ending, which depending on your choice, will make him either become vengeful, merciful, or a mix of the two if you kill Salty Wounds yourself, with that being the ideal ending. Urged on by my chat, I tell Joshua to off General Gobbledygook, and with that, the story of Zion and the Burned Man concludes. Oh, and by the way, if you had any unfinished business with Waking Cloud, Follows Chalk, Daniel, or Joshua, you better have taken care of that before you started this final mission, as all four will completely disappear from the game after completing this quest, so be careful. Honest Hearts is a bit of a mixed bag in terms of Fallout DLCs. On one hand, it has an amazing setting and character of Joshua Graham. His lore and motivations are incredibly interesting, and he's a rare example of a character who really makes the player stop and think about what kind of man he is, and who he should be. That coupled with the god tier voice acting in his cool outfit, as well as a sweet ass pistol he gives you at the end of the DLC, I completely understand why he's such a beloved character. However, this DLC falls short with its quests and things to do, as there really isn't much at all outside of the already pretty underwhelming side quests and finding the survivors' logs and caches. It's still a quality DLC, however, it's time to move on to our third expansion, Old World Blues. DLC number 3, Old World Blues. Old World Blues is considered not only one of the best New Vegas DLCs, but also considered amongst the greatest DLCs, period. Now, is that true? Well, let's get into it. Old World Blues kicks off when you activate a peculiar downed satellite at around midnight in-game time at the Mojave Drive-In, already setting the tone of this DLC to be a nostalgic and humorous science fiction themed expansion. Activating the satellite transports you to the Big Empty, a large crater east of the Mojave that Wasteland explorers believe to be completely empty. as the crater has large imposing cliffs that are hard to pass through, as well as all those who attempt to enter the Big Empty completely vanishing after entering. When we teleport there, we find that the place isn't empty at all, and is rather the site of the pre-war research and development defense company known as Big MT. Big MT is if Lockheed Martin was run by neurotic redditors rather than stone-cold businessmen, with the facility being responsible for creating some of the nastiest shit in the wasteland, such as the aforementioned Cazadors and Night Stalkers. But they also worked on other projects such as the Cyberdogs, the Cloud, vending machines and holograms from the Sierra Madre, as well as creating the fungus that turns people into spore carriers that we see in the base game and in Zion. If there's some fucked up shit that isn't natural or created by radiation, Big MT is probably behind it. We wake up on the balcony of a massive domed building and can look out over the crater and see the distant facilities. You also notice that you're in a hospital gown, and we'll find out why soon. For now though, we gotta figure out what's going on, so we head to the center of the dome, the think tank. The think tank is the central research center at Big Empty, and it's where the brains of the executive researchers of the Big Empty carry out their experiments and research, living on for hundreds of years by inserting their brains into robot bodies, also known as think tanks. Don't get confused. However, over 200 years of being a floating brain in a pod of biogel, coupled with some faulty programming of the think tank bots, has resulted in the remaining doctors getting a little funny, which we'll see soon. We meet the 5 Big MT brains: Dr. Klein, the arrogant leader, Dr. Boros, the dramatic nerd, Dr. O, the disrespected and disrespectful robotics expert, Dr. 8, the sonic expert who only speaks in unintelligible radio waves, and Dr. Dala, the human and flesh-obsessed pervert. The writing and humor is probably the most well-known aspect of this DLC, and this is for a really good reason. The think tanks are absolutely cracked out, talking as if they have dementia, schizophrenia, and syphilis all at once. And it's absolutely great. The voice acting probably shines the brightest in this DLC out of all of them. All the think tank doctors have great performances and personalities, and the writing is sharp and hilarious, although some jokes are a tad outdated. For example, when Klein starts freaking out that your feet and hands have penises on them. But the writing overall still holds up great 13 years later. Obsidian were really flexing their cleverness and really pushed the limits of Fallout's sense of humor, without it ever getting too ridiculous. We learn from Klein that we have been unwillingly operated on, having our spine and heart removed and replaced with synthetic parts. We have also been fully lobotomized, with our brains scooped out and replaced with Tesla coils. But thanks to the headshot Benny gave us before the game, the lobotomization process had an unexpected result, and we made it out with our intelligence intact. While we're talking to Klein and the rest of the doctors, we're interrupted by a transmission from Dr. Mobius, an evil think tank bot who terrorizes the other tanks with threatening transmissions and sending out robo-scorpions to harass them from his base in the Forbidden Zone, keeping the think tank cooped up in their dome out of fear of him. And unfortunately for us, Mobius has also stolen our brain, and since we are currently lobotomized, we wouldn't be able to leave the Big Mountain's force field that prevents humans without brains from leaving the crater. Klein then tasks us with helping out the think tank by recovering 3 technologies across the Big Empty crater that could be used to access the Forbidden Zone and take down Mobius. Those being the X2 antenna, the sonic emitter gun, and the X13 stealth suit. Before we go, we get a K9000 machine gun, a minigun type weapon with the brain of a dog attached that whimpers and barks when used. We're also given the sonic emitter gun, which the think tank forgot they had, and then Dr. A sonjaculates into it. He just got done sucking and fucking that gun.
Oh, I don't think so.
And then gives it to us, tasking us with getting a new sound to use for the gun. You can shake down the think tank through some guns and energy weapons checks for extra ammo, and after all that chatting, which can take around 20 minutes to get through, they've got quite a lot to say. The doctors love to bicker and talk over each other, extending the conversation to a pretty far degree. But the length of this chat is helped greatly by the performances and writing, so you won't even notice really. Once you're done chatting, you're finally cut loose to explore the sink and the rest of the crater. My first stop was in the sink, which serves as the player's home base and is the old room of Dr. Mobius. We can talk to the central unit, who opens up bartering for us, as well as tasks us with finding the personality units for the other furniture and machines of the sink, as Dr. Mobius was a bit of a freak, and had programmed several personalities and upgrades for his room's appliances. This is a great quest to start with, as it'll send you all over the Big Empty to collect the personality tapes and allow you to discover the interesting locations this DLC has to offer. I have one complaint with this quest though. The quest markers are given to you in waves, and you'll get around 3 to 5 markers all across the map, and once they're collected, another wave of markers will appear, and oftentimes there'll be additional tapes in a location that you had already been to, forcing you to backtrack to the location and pick up the tape you missed. I don't see why all the markers could just be placed at once, or just reduce the number of waves that the markers come in on. as all it does is work to pad out the playtime a little bit. Regardless, despite this gripe I have with it, this quest is still super enjoyable. All of the sync furniture and machines have great performances and cheeky dialogue, and it's super enjoyable to install their tapes and see what kind of wacky personality they have. Like the horny ass seed cloning machine that desperately wants your seed, to the cool DJ personality of the talking jukebox named Blind Dio Jefferson. But my favorites are Muggy and the Toaster. The voice performances are excellent, especially on Muggy, a neurotic miniature Securitron who has an addiction to cleaning coffee mugs, and the voice actor pours his dick and balls into this performance.
They programmed me to know that too. They made me just to torture me.
And Muggy really does sound crack the fuck out. It's great. In general, the sync's interfaces serve to provide buffs and to process objects into crafting materials for you. They're completely optional, and if you don't care or feel like restoring the sync, you don't have to, but I do recommend it just for the writing and jokes alone. We then strike out into the big empty crater, where you'll very quickly get jumped by several enemies. True to the lore about nobody returning from the big empty, the open world of the crater is pretty dangerous, which you'll become real familiar with real fast. You'll get jumped by cyber dogs, Mr. Handies, Robo-Brains, Lobotomites, Protectrons, Trauma Override Harness Skeletons, Night Stalkers, security bots, and of course, the fucking Robo-Scorpions. I understand why the Think Tank are so afraid of these fuckers. They attack in packs, and you'll usually have to fight anywhere from 3 to 7 of them at a time. Not only that, the robotic plated armor makes them very spongy, and they are very resistant to regular bullets. So your best option is to use the skeet-covered sonic emitter to fight them, as the revelation sound it's using will paralyze the scorpions on critical hits. So unless you're already strapped with a powerful energy weapon, or have armor-piercing bullets to spare, the sonic emitter is a must. The large number of enemies in the open world is a bit double-edged for me, as on one hand it fits really well what we know about the lore and dangers of the Big Mountain facility, but at the same time it can make traveling a bit of a slog when you're forced into multiple fairly long, resource-intensive battles when trying to explore complete side objectives in the Big Empty. But this is a problem for me only around 20% of the time. Otherwise it feels like a fair and appropriate challenge for what the DLC is going for. Getting the first technology is pretty straightforward. Go to the X2 facility, fight through it, get to the roof, grab the antenna, mash up them steely scorpions, and that's it. The X2 antenna being a unique melee weapon that does extra damage to robots and power armor, which is the case for most new weapons in this DLC. But since I don't use melee much in Fallout games, I just put it away and mostly forgot about it. Next up is to go to the X8 lab to complete the high school horror quest. I have a bit of a bone to pick with this quest, and it's kind of for the dogs. You'll see what I mean in a sec. This quest will have you running tests for Dr. Boros, which involves the courier fighting through a mock high school, collecting student entries from terminals and fighting off turrets and cyber dogs, as if you were a Chinese communist spy. Sounds fine, right? Nope. In order to fully complete this quest, you'll have to run through this high school test 4 times, twice with cyber dogs, and twice with the deadlier Night Stalkers. The high school's layout never changes. The only thing that changes is the positions of the terminals you need to access to complete the test, and they're based on which test you choose. By the time you do the test with the deadlier Night Stalkers, it'll already have gotten repetitive. Luckily though, this isn't required for the main quest, as that only requires the first 2 tests to be completed, as that opens up the quest to head towards the X13 facility to get a key that unlocks a secret test room that contains a large cyber dog named Gabe, who was Boris' pet at one point. Once we take care of Gabe and get a tape of his bark, all the while packing more Robo-Scorpions on the way out, the Robo-Scorpions love to appear at the end of quests, that will complete the main quest portion of the X8 test. As for the final test, we need to head to the X13 facility and get the Mark II stealth suit and complete an infiltration test using the suit. This suit's pretty funny. When equipped, it'll talk to you, an odd choice for a stealth suit. The stealth suit also injects you with a stim pack and med-X if you're low on health for the former, and when you enter combat for the latter, which can inadvertently get you addicted to it, which I found way more funny than annoying, because that's completely your fault if the suit gets you hooked on it. The test involves sneaking past patrolling Robo-Brains, and if you're spotted, you'll have to restart. And unfortunately, this is the low point of the DLC for me. I'm not a stealth player when playing New Vegas, and the test itself is slow and plodding, as you sit twiddling your thumbs waiting for the Robo-Brains to look the other way so you can sneak past them. I didn't even bother to complete the X13 side quest, as the advanced tests are just more of the same as before, with the reward being an upgraded stealth suit I probably wouldn't even use anyway. So please forgive me for doing this. With the stealth suit acquired, we have everything we need to return to the think tank and go confront Dr. Mobius in the Forbidden Zone. Unfortunately, before we can do that, this DLC decided to lobotomize my CPU! My game was dropping frames to an almost unplayable degree. Ooh, wow, ooh, wow, ooh, wow, oh boy, this shit is going down to like the ones. So after an hour of unscrewing and rescrewing in my heatsink fan, I was finally ready. This game made me do some science IRL. This DLC is crazy immersive. But before we go after Dr. Mobius for good, how about we do a few quests with the think tank bots? I convinced Dala to not be so ashamed of her human body fetish and allow her to gaze at us making movements and gestures while she creams herself. I helped Dr. O with using his real name. It's not an O, it's a 0. Dr. Zero. Finally figure out how to understand Dr. 8 and help Boros with remembering his feelings for his dog Gabe. This quest for Boros is an interesting one, as I believe it's the only time the Wild Wasteland trait actually makes the game harder for you. He tasks you to go to Higgs Village, a mock neighborhood that the think tank lived in when they were still human, and retrieve a bowl from Gabe's old doghouse. However, when you roll up to the doghouse, a miniature Deathclaw named Stripe will appear out of it, and Stripe doesn't fuck around. Despite his size, he's on the same level as a mother Deathclaw. Good thing Honest Hearts hooked me up with a compliance regulator, which I used to stun Stripe and take him down that way. Otherwise I'd be cooked. But not before Stripe did this. The stick. Oh, don't do that, don't do that. Oh, what's he doing? What's he doing? Oh. These quests, although short and simple, give us a better look into the tank's psyches and just how far removed they are from being actual rational humans. That, plus more opportunities to hear some great voice work and jokes, make these quests really worth it. And it was a fun challenge figuring out ways to raise my stats to pass the checks needed to complete these quests. But now, it's actually time to go after Mobius and get our brain back. We check back in with Klein, and after a quick battle with dementia, he finally realizes that the technologies we recovered can be used to get inside the Forbidden Zone. So off we go. After fighting a few more Robo-Scorpions along the way, we can finally enter the Forbidden Zone and take on the final boss of this expansion, a giant Robo-Scorpion. Fitting. The giant Robo-Scorpion hits about as hard as he is large, and can shoot off projectiles that have massive range and deal radiation damage as well, and on top of that is an absolute tank. There are several terminals around the facility you can activate to spawn in robots to help you fight it and draw away fire, or you can just do what I did, and camp behind a wall and take potshots at the Scorpion with the advanced layer until it dies. That also works. I also enjoy the open-ended nature of this fight, being able to just attack it directly or use the terminals to your advantage, although it's a little too easy to cheese out in my opinion, as the Scorpion just kinda sits in the center of the room, mostly unmoving unless it's to face its current target. With the Scorpion packed, we have nothing left standing in our way of Mobius, and we enter the Forbidden Dome to confront him. Upon meeting Mobius, however, he isn't what we expect him to be. Rather than being some cartoonish villain who wants to kill us with Robo-Scorpions, Mobius is more like your friendly yet extremely senile grandpa. Mobius, like the other tanks, has got that dementia, schizophrenia, and syphilis trifecta, but he also loves popping Mentats and Psycho, further wrecking his memory. When asked about the threatening transmissions he sent to the think tank, he says that he was just geeking on Psycho at the time and had recorded it in a haze. He also reveals some very important information about the current state of the think tank and why he swiped our brain to begin with. Originally, Mobius was a member of the think tank, but Mobius became concerned about their behavior over time. As the other doctors became more deranged and their experiments became more dangerous and depraved, he became fearful that they would eventually move out of the crater to experiment on the population of the wasteland and release even more dangerous abominations and robots into the world. Reaching his breaking point, Mobius decided to reprogram the think tank bots, making them lose their senses of time, location, and history, making them believe the crater of the Big Empty is the only place in existence. He also took on the persona of Dr. Mobius and unleashed the Robo-Scorpions across Big Mountain to keep the doctors contained in their dome, fearful of him. We also learn from Mobius the real reason as to why he snatched our brain. It turns out that due to the bullet wound in our brain that Benny so generously gave us, the Autodoc performing our lobotomy was able to upgrade itself to fix the wound as well as removing the brain, resulting in us, the first truly successful lobotomy. With this advancement in lobotomizations, the think tank could then use the data from our brain extraction, along with the technologies we recovered, to transplant their own brains into new human bodies, allowing them to pass through the radar fence and unleash scientific mayhem on the wasteland unopposed. I love this revelation. It's an extremely sobering thing to learn amongst the overall unseriousness and wackiness of the DLC at large. It really reminds you how far gone the doctors are and that they need to be contained. After chatting up Mobius, we can finally talk to our brain to hopefully convince him to re-enter our skull so we can finally get out of this whack-ass radar prison. We convince our Stewie Griffin-sounding brain to rejoin us after another comedic and dialogue masterclass from Obsidian.
Well, look who finally dragged themselves in out of the way.
I like how he talks like Stewie Griffin.
Where have we been?
And with our brain in tow, we're ready to confront the think tank. I convinced them that I'm the real Dr. Mobius, and I convinced the think tank to stay put in their dome and to continue their work on scientific experiments for me and for science, which placates them, allowing the courier to keep the deranged scientists contained and under close supervision, which is probably the best ending we can ask for with these guys. With the story complete, the last thing to touch on is the rest of the map, as the main quest will only take you through a few locations of the Big Empty. This is where the DLC is at its strongest. You can explore to find other research facilities with unique bosses and loot, like the Specimen 72 Cazador or the legendary Blowfly, just to name two, as well as finding remnants of bases and camps left by Elijah and Christine, which tells the tale of Elijah camping out in the Big Empty, being pursued by Christine and injuring her in a battle at a concentration camp, using ghoulified prisoners as walking bombs. The Big Empty is where Elijah found the bomb cars he uses in Dead Money. Elijah then later finding out about the Sierra Madre while in the Big Empty, and some really great examples of environmental storytelling and callbacks to the other DLCs, along with some strong teasers for the final DLC as well. The Big Empty is dense and dangerous, and you won't ever be bored exploring it. And with that, we can say goodbye to Old World Blues and move on to the final DLC of the pack, Lonesome Road. DLC number 4, Lonesome Road. Lonesome Road was the final DLC released and is the penultimate conclusion to the overarching story set up in Dead Money, and focuses on our courier's past and his relationship with another character I've yet to mention, a courier named Ulysses. Although we have never met Ulysses, we hear and see his presence all across both the base game and in the DLCs. Ulysses up to this point has been like a specter that haunts our character. We hear about him often, and he seems to know who we are. Worse yet, he also seems to have a problem with us. In the base game, we learn in Prim that there was originally another courier who was meant to take the platinum chip to Mr. House, but had refused the offer, and left the delivery to us when he spotted our name on the ledger. That courier was our guy Ulysses. Remember the white legs from Honest Hearts, and how they were able to destroy the well-armed settlement of New Canaan? Ulysses was the one to train them and teach them how to use their health-melting guns they're strapped with in Honest Hearts. Remember how I said Elijah learned about the Sierra Madre while in the Big Empty? That's because Ulysses told him about it, as Ulysses was also at the Big Empty crater around that time, and he had even nursed Christine back to health after her disastrous encounter with Elijah at the concentration camp. We also see his emblem drawn on the walls all around the Big Empty, which are colored markers to denote dangerous areas or areas with loot caches. All Fallout game stories are driven by the fact that the player character is the most capable person on Earth, and their impact is by far the greatest. So I think Ulysses' character as someone who is just as capable and impactful on the world as the player themselves is a really cool idea. Now that we know about our opposition, let's get into it. Lonesome Road sees us heading to the Divide, a geologically devastated area that's fraught with powerful storms, whipping up irradiated sandstorms that cover the landscape. As we play through the expansion, we learn about the history of the Divide and how it became so hellish and devastated. Seriously, this place looks like the warped and destroyed edge of the world where you fight the Soul of Cinder in Dark Souls 3, with impossibly warped and twisted structures strewn throughout the canyons of the Divide, and it looks fantastic. Fallout is no stranger to destroyed cities and architecture, but the devastation of the Divide is on a whole nother level. Buildings jut out from the canyon walls and fallen ruins litter the bottom of it, the verticality of the area giving it a strikingly brutal appearance. The environment artists were cooking on this one. As for how the Divide ended up like this, well, let me tell you the story. Throughout conversations with Ulysses and hearing some tapes he left behind, the Divide was an upstart settlement, in Ulysses' words, a nation taking its first breath. The Divide, even before its destruction, was suffering from massive storms generated by the nearby Big Empty weather control technology. It was kept alive by couriers, specifically our courier, who was vital in transporting supplies to the Divide, braving the harsh storms to support the small settlement. It gave itself the name of the Divide, a reference to its placement between the settled NCR territories to the west and the comparatively unsettled frontier of the eastern Mojave wasteland and beyond. Sometime during this civilization's startup, Ulysses had come to the Divide. Ulysses was a former member of the Twisted Hairs tribe from Dry Wells in Arizona, one of the first tribes to join the at the time upstart Caesar's Legion, serving as scouts for them, and Ulysses was the best scout of them all. Being a skilled survivalist and sharply intelligent, he was able to cross much larger distances in shorter times than any of his peers, cementing himself as a valuable asset. Once the Legion had conquered most of Arizona, however, the Twisted Hairs were betrayed, enslaved, and assimilated into the Legion, with Volpez and Kulta leading the pacification of his home of Dry Wells. Despite this betrayal, Ulysses stayed loyal to the Legion, but changed his name from whatever it was originally to Ulysses, in reference to Ulysses S. Grant, an old world president who, in Ulysses' words, fought during a time of two flags, and he had to make them one, mirroring the current situation between the Legion and the NCR Ulysses found himself in. Ulysses continued working for Caesar, becoming a Frumentari, who were essentially the CIA of Caesar's Legion, who carry out special operations that require subterfuge or infiltration into a faction/society. As a Frumentari, Ulysses operated as a courier and a scout, and was even the first to scout the Hoover Dam and observe the NCR for the Legion, revealing Ulysses' key role in the main conflict of the game. It was around this time that he came across the Divide, and saw hope and potential in it as a possible newer, yet greater civilization that could unite the NCR and Legion into something better, as Ulysses didn't see any long-term hope for either nation. Ulysses, inspired by the pre-war symbols and the tenacity of its citizens, stayed in the Divide hoping to free it of all NCR and Legion influence, as they had both moved into the Divide, the former using it as a vital second trade route from California to the Mojave, and the latter there to destroy said trade route. In a stroke of apocalyptically bad luck, however, the Divide held a dark secret. Beneath the ruins of the Divide were scores of unlaunched nuclear warheads, still active from the Great War. One day, our courier delivered a peculiar package to the Divide, which had been sent there by the NCR due to the package having symbols that matched those found in the Divide. After the courier made his delivery and departed, the package turned out to be a mechanism containing launch codes for the missiles. My bad, guys. The warheads detonated beneath the ground, tearing open a gash in the earth itself. The people of the Divide were obliterated, and the NCR and Legion soldiers were either killed or ghoulified, with the dust storms flaying their skin, turning them into the jerky-skinned marked men we fight throughout this expansion. Ulysses was severely injured, and would have died if he wasn't saved by medical Eyebots who had also reactivated alongside the nukes, healing him because of the American flag emblem he had painted on his duster jacket, the robots believing him to be an American soldier. After healing, Ulysses blamed us for what happened to the Divide, blaming us for killing the only bastion of hope he saw in the wasteland. Ulysses, believing us to be dead and unsure of what to do next, returned to Caesar, who then sent him as an emissary to Salt Lake City to help the Whitelegs destroy New Canaan. At some point during this campaign, the Whitelegs, who had begun to revere Ulysses for showing them how to use and maintain weapons, showed him that they had begun twisting their hair into dreadlocks like him. This was a nuclear black pill for Ulysses to swallow, seeing it as a disgusting imitation, as they only did it to copy him and did not know the history of the braid's significance to his tribe. Now disillusioned completely with the Legion, Ulysses left Caesar's service after the New Canaan campaign and began wandering the wasteland to try to find a way to, quote, wake America up, which led him to the Big Mountain and later back to the Divide after finding out that we had survived the destruction of the Divide, returning there to set up a final meeting between the two couriers, which is where the DLC starts us out. We enter the Divide from the mountain passage and get a glimpse of the cracked gash in the earth of the Divide from a distance, and enter an old missile silo. We explore the silo and find an Eddie Eyebot that we can activate, and the DLC has already contradicted itself. This so-called lonesome road, but you get a companion within the first 10 minutes. Not very lonesome if you ask me. No, I'm just joking. Anyway, this is Eddie, very similar to the base game Eddie, but he can activate commissary terminals for you to trade with, which are lifesavers for ammo and armor in this DLC. He can also be upgraded from looting destroyed Eyebots that provide several tiers of pretty helpful perks that can transfer back to the base game Eddie once the DLC is complete. Eddie also provides some extra lore by playing back some recordings from Enclave scientists that provide a surprisingly compelling story for this little Eyebot in his journey back home. This is probably my favorite companion in any of the DLCs, providing much needed combat assistance for us along with those sweet perks. But for now, we continue through the silo, which is a really cool start to the DLC, as the silo is angled a bit from all the devastation, and there's this cool moment with the silo doors opening to reveal a large nuclear missile being worked on by an Eyebot. Once we exit the silo, Ulysses calls us up from Eddie, and we first get to talk to him. Ulysses, following the trend set by the other DLCs, does a great voice performance. His gruff voice and vague musings about what happened and what his plans for us are great, and work well to keep us motivated to learn more about the Divide and to finally meet him face to face. My only complaints about Ulysses' writing and motivations come from the want to learn more about his motivations. Ulysses is hell-bent on his revenge mission because of how devastating the loss of the Divide was, and I wish we could learn more about the Divide and what it was doing, and why Ulysses saw so much hope in it. And unfortunately for us, all we learn about it is from hearsay after it had already gotten fucked up. Not only that, but his beef with our player character is pretty one-sided. Ulysses blames us for the destruction of the Divide, but he would have to realize that the destruction was unintentional, and we even tell him so. But nothing we can say will convince him until we actually meet him in the end, which is a tad disappointing. Bro just simply has a bone to pick with us. Once out of the silo, Lonesome Road's gameplay really kicks off. Lonesome Road is a sort of inverse of Dead Money, where Dead Money was a stripped-down, methodical, survival-based expansion that retooled Fallout's game mechanics. Lonesome Road is a full-force, late-game combat challenge that embraces the core Fallout mechanics. This mod will have you scrapping with only the nastiest enemies in the entire game. You'll fight Deathclaws, the new Marked Men enemy faction, who are ghouls from both NCR and Legion survivors of the nuclear disaster that Divide and banded together to survive. They wear tough armor and wield only the strongest late-game weapons, such as brush guns and anti-material rifles, and most annoyingly the missile launchers. They're as tough as any human enemy can get in the game. You'll also encounter a new mysterious creature species called the Tunnelers, small, black, bioluminescent humanoid creatures that were discovered when the bombs tore open the earth, exposing them to the surface for the first time. These little fuckers are like little miniature Deathclaws, lunging at the player to deal massive melee damage and can take some serious punishment too, even for the lowest tier of Tunneler. Ulysses fears they may pose an existential threat to the Mojave, and I agree, the Mojave Wastelanders will be a cooked product trying to fight these things. Your enjoyment of Lonesome Road will come down to how well you enjoy the combat of the game, as well as how prepared you are. Lonesome Road is by far the most linear of the DLCs, with very little side content outside of collecting Ulysses' logs in the endgame Courier's Mile area and the possible NCR and Legion endgame areas, depending on your choices at the end of the DLC. You travel through the devastated Hopeville, fight Deathclaws and marked men on the overpass, and there's a cool moment where you can see Ulysses lurking and stalking you from a ruined building. You fight Blade, shoot off a nuke for shits and giggles, and fight probably the most difficult encounter in the game. Fighting tunnelers on a small confined mining platform while explosions are rocking the shit out of your camera and character. And you can't open your inventory when you're shaking like this, by the way. Very epic feature. But with my guy Randall's stick, the medicine stick, and some pro gameplay, we power through. Our reward for making it through this tough sequence being the privilege to throw hands in the demonically named Cave of the Abaddon, where you fight, you guessed it, more tunnelers. But I did enjoy very much blowing the dome off of that tunneler queen. After exiting the cave, Ulysses hijacks Eddie and commands him to return to Ulysses' temple, as Eddie contains launch codes just like our package did when we fucked the Divide up originally, and we had unwittingly delivered him right to Ulysses. We do some more fighting, icing some Deathclaws and more marked men along the way. I also took on the Deathclaw boss Rar, Honest Hearts coming in clutch again, using the compliance regulator to freeze his ass in place and take him down, as I'd be fucking mincemeat without it, as Rar can kill you with only a light caress. After killing Rar and doing a small amount of exploring for some cool ass riot armor, it's finally time to confront Ulysses and end our long journey. After picking up Eddie again, no little buddy left behind, we enter the heart of Ulysses' temple, and the entrance is awesome. We finally see Ulysses, back turned to us like a true Vlone soldier. Eyebots pass overhead as a nuclear missile rises up behind a flag draped across twisted metal beams and sets in place to launch. It's great. It's one of the best scenes in all of New Vegas. We speak with Ulysses and we find out his plan. He wants to bombard the NCR with the remaining nukes still in the Divide, believing the NCR to be a shallow imitation of the old world with no knowledge of the history to learn lessons from it, and is doomed to fail. And as such, Ulysses believes it must be destroyed in nuclear fire. This encounter can end in one of two ways. You either fail to convince Ulysses and have to fight him to the death, or you can convince him to back down and see the light. The latter being no question the better option. You convince him by telling him that even though the Divide was lost, if it's something he truly believes in, it can be rebuilt. Seeing the light and ascended logic and reasoning of our courier, we then team up to fight off the marked men that are now invading his temple. This part is just great. Ulysses liquefies these ops like it's nothing, and fighting alongside him as an equal is a great moment, and is a bit more cinematic and exciting than it is actually challenging. But I prefer it this way after all the build-up across this DLC and all the others. Once the fight is over, you can then choose to disarm the nukes, or fire them off at the Legion, NCR, or both. This can be pretty funny after talking down Ulysses from launching the nukes, and then he just has to stand there helplessly as you launch them anyway. Nuking the NCR or the Legion will unlock either the Long 15 or the Dry Wells areas, which are endgame areas that are irradiated, full of strong enemies that can regenerate health, but contain unique armor sets and lots of ammunition. They're both similar to the aforementioned Courier's Mile, and the areas are all pretty short, just involving clearing out the enemies and then looting the places for piles of loot. But I appreciate the late game challenge they introduce. And with that, that's all the Fallout New Vegas DLC is complete. We can now move on to the last, and not quite as beloved game, Fallout 4. It's June 14th, E3 2015, the first ever Bethesda showcase. Today is the day we get our first look at what Todd and the boys have been cooking up in the lab since 2011. After 5 long years since New Vegas, we finally get a look at the latest Fallout mainline entry, Fallout 4, and by God is it looking good. And so is Todd. This looks like the next gen Fallout game we've been waiting for so long. The graphics are incredible, the combat looks evolved and truly next generation, and the animations are fluid and detailed, and the... wait. What the fuck is that? Is that a fucking dialogue wheel? Is the player character talking right now? Is the player character seriously talking like Commander fucking Shepard talking about my favorite store in the Citadel on that bullshit? A fully voiced protagonist? And is that a Minecraft-ass building mode? I mean, that's cool and all, but I hope the devs weren't taking time off of making meaningful quest and game world content to make this feature. What are we cooking here, Todd? Todd? These new features represent a trend Bethesda games have been following since the release of Morrowind. A sort of DRPG-ification of their games from numbers-focused RPGs with derived stats and raw dice roll skill checks to action-adventure games with RPG-like elements. Hell, their latest release Skyrim had almost no skill check mechanics or stat-based skills to speak of, with all the role-playing elements being mostly reserved for how you engage in combat, such as if you are a fighter, magic user, or a thief or sneak player, and have chosen perks to strengthen your own fighting style. Streamlining these hardcore RPG elements allows you to open the door to a wider audience of gamers to be able to play your game without as much RPG game overhead of learning the systems and mechanics. But the trade-off of this being the alienation of the longtime series fans and enjoyers of the more traditional RPG mechanics, and the loss of the open-ended nature of completing quests. And applying these changes to a Fallout game is an interesting gamble, to say the absolute least. As ever since Interplay dropped the original Fallout in 1997, role-playing was king. It even says on the damn box, a post-nuclear role-playing game. And the dialogue itself was a massive part of the gameplay. Half the actual gameplay of Fallout 1 and 2 is just talking to various NPCs and interacting with and gathering information from them via a slew of dialogue options, which can be locked or unlocked based on what skills you have. Sure, you can still just fight everything you saw and throw hands with your ops all day, but the core gameplay loop was talking to NPCs for information, which oftentimes is the main way you learn about how to approach a situation from different angles, and then you resolve the situation by using the skills your character is best in. And there was almost always several different ways to resolve any given situation the game threw at you. But now, with a voiced player character, who has to be able to speak every single possible line of dialogue, means Bethesda has to spend several additional man-hours and money recording pages and pages of voice lines, and many fear that this direction would severely limit the player's dialogue options and by extension, the ability to actually roleplay and be able to tackle any given situation or quest from multiple different angles in the traditional Fallout gameplay loop. And they were absolutely right in these fears. Fallout 4 is undisputedly the most straightforward out of all the Fallout games, being much closer to a Borderlands-esque looter shooter with some light RPG elements than its forefathers. Gone are the numbers-based stats in exchange for a Skyrim-esque perk chart. Although some quests allow you to make some binary choices, or attempt some speech checks to skip quest segments or to get some extra rewards, Fallout 4 mostly builds off of the Skyrim school of game design. Go here, kill all enemies or retrieve X item, pilfer the end dungeon loot chest, repeat. Skill checks are now practically gone outside of some very specific instances, and most quests are resolved in only one way, the only variable being how you engage in the combat based off of your perk selections. Bethesda has given up on building quest scenarios with multiple solutions and role-playing opportunities long ago, and in this game they're much more concerned with you shooting up your safe, Fallout familiar ops with their next-generation shooter gameplay. Which I will admit is a massive step up from the Fallout New Vegas / Fallout 3 mechanics at least. But that's not saying a whole lot, as those games' shooting mechanics were clunkier than an obese robot. That's not to say all the mainstay Fallout design changes are bad, however. I'm actually a pretty big fan of the new weapon and armor crafting systems, along with how power armor is implemented. The weapon crafting system is surprisingly extensive, allowing you to modify weapon sights, barrels, receivers, magazines, stocks, as well as changing weapon ammo types and fire rates. You can change a weapon from a pistol to a rifle just by changing what mods it uses, and the usage of junk items to build said mods is almost downright ingenious. You really do feel like a filthy-ass wasteland scavenger stuffing your pockets up with desk fans and 200-year-old glue to build a fresh new scope for your weapon, and it adds another layer to world exploration and interaction, which Bethesda still excel at. Power armor is also completely revamped, now being a freestanding suit that you can climb in and out of, and actually feels, powerful. It's no longer just another armor piece that's only unique in the fact that it's locked behind a boolean. And on top of that, there are extensive customizations for the power armor, just like the weapons. You're now a fucking walking tank, but that does come with the trade-off that power armor runs on fusion cores, which are fairly rare in the game world, at least in the early / mid-game. The DLCs start passing around fusion cores like candy. And power armor components can take damage and break, which will force you to repair them, further draining your resources. The last and most unprecedented change to Fallout 4 is the building / settlement systems. This is a wholly new system in the Fallout series, and has been a long requested feature by fans ever since Fallout 3 came out. Screw the prefab house building Bethesda has done in Skyrim with Hearthfire. This system was a new and mostly free-form build whatever you want mode. Minecraft had reached its apex in popularity when Fallout 4 was in development, and I've got to believe that its popularity compelled the devs to add a building / resource management mode to the game to some extent. You can now build your player home from scratch, and not only that, you can also build facilities and farms for NPCs, and manage their settlements like a true post-nuclear landlord. It's pretty damn ambitious, and I commend the devs for taking a crack at the feature at all. However, unfortunately, I didn't really care for this feature. The game will be like, hey, you want to build up a settlement at fucking Abernathy Farm and run a caravan? Like, bro, not really. I'd build a small house or base and sanctuary to dump off all my crap and power armor in, and that'd usually be how far I'd get with the crafting portion of the game. The build menu is frankly ass. It's super clunky, slow, and is a mess of menus within menus. Placing down building walls is very janky, and oftentimes the walls won't snap to where you want them to, and will oftentimes snap around to places you aren't even really aiming at. And if you want to build up another settlement, you'll first have to spend lots of time gathering up the resources to build houses, power, and furniture for your settlers, and that is a great way to burn away hours and hours of your life. And it's with these settlements that we can take a look at the first DLCs, Wasteland Workshop, Contraptions Workshop, and Vault-Tec Workshop. DLCs number 1, Wasteland Workshop, Contraptions Workshop, and Vault-Tec Workshop. No. Just no. I apologize to all the settlement enjoyers out there. If you enjoy the settlement systems in these DLCs, that's great. At least someone was able to get something out of them. But as for me, these DLCs aren't doing anything for me. Wasteland Workshop is just an expansion of the pre-existing building mechanics, adding a lot of new furniture and decoration types, with its biggest addition being the ability to trap creatures and build arenas for them to fight in, which is a cool feature in theory, but in practice is only a slightly entertaining side piece of content at best, and seems mostly pointless outside of the novelty of the concept in and of itself. Contraptions Workshop is a bit meatier, adding a lot of new mechanical objects like conveyor belts, logic gates, and other various technical items that can interact with each other to create some Tekkit-esque automated builds, but again, it mostly exists as fluff for the settlement building. Finally, the most unique and justifiable DLC for the workshops is the Vault-Tec Workshop, as it adds a slew of vault-themed building objects and is the only one to actually add new content to the game world, as the titular Vault Workshop takes place in the newly added Vault 88, where you the player are able to become overseer of Vault 88 and build up your vault and run experiments on your dwellers after a short and an unengaging questline, which serves as a tutorial for the new Vault experiment systems, which are pretty disappointing experiments. Those being a bike experiment, a spiked soda experiment, and an eye scanner they called a Phoropter experiment. It's definitely the most worthwhile of the workshop DLCs, but outside of the fairly sizable Vault 88 area that contains healthy amounts of rare materials, this DLC again is just fluff for the settlement mode. And if you're like me and didn't care for, or don't invest too much time in the settlement portion of the game, you'll be getting jack shit out of these expansions. Ideally, in a perfect world, these settlement and building system expansions would have been in the game since day one, as they'd make the settlement system actually pretty dense and worthwhile, but as it stands, you're paying $15 for some frankly unimpressive feature buffs. But I don't want to leave you hanging on the settlement end, and if you aren't too hot on the vanilla settlement systems, I recommend heading on over to the Nexus or whatever mod platform you use and downloading Sim Settlements 2. Sim Settlements 2 completely overhauls how the settlement mechanics work, changing it from a fully manual building grindfest to an actual settlement manager that's dictated by placeable plots. It completely removes the tedious grind for the resources you'd be constantly running out of, and instead leaves all that shit to the computer. And it adds plenty of different plot types to make your settlements feel varied and alive. Not only does it completely revamp the settlement system, it also adds a large, fully voiced quest line that unlocks new Sim Settlements 2 features as you play through it. And although I've only played a few hours so far, I can confidently say that this is one of the most impressive mods I've ever played, if not the most impressive. Almost every aspect of it is highly professional and extremely well crafted, from the voice acting, to the quest design, to the actual new building mechanics. And if you're able to download and play it, I highly recommend this mod to cover the settlement portion of Fallout 4, and the Sim Settlement 2 devs just absolutely killed it. It's nothing short of mod greatness. But with that out of the way, let's get into an actual real man's DLC, Automatron. DLC number 2, Automatron. Automatron is unique in terms of Fallout DLCs, because up until now, Fallout DLCs had a pretty established precedent. Both Fallout 3 and New Vegas had 4 expansions each that all added a new map or area, with the only exception being Broken Steel. But even that expansion included pretty big gameplay additions, most notably allowing the player to continue the game after completing the main questline, and adding new world factions and side quests, along with an extensive questline of its own. Automatron is the first DLC to really break this tradition. It doesn't add any new worlds, it has a pretty brief questline, and its existence is mostly pinned on its new robot crafting systems. Do these change-ups ruin the DLC? Let's get into it. Automatron starts when the player reaches level 15, which upon reaching that level will unlock the Caravan Distress Frequency radio channel that the player can listen in on to start the DLC. The radio signal tells our player that a caravan has been jumped by wild killer robots, and gives us the location of where the attack is taking place. Upon arriving at the scene, we fight a pack of the new robot enemies this mod introduces, and I found myself really liking their designs. These aren't the typical robot enemies that we fight throughout the base game. They're these jury-rigged junk bots that have mixed and matched parts. Robo-Brain bodies with Mr. Handy jets, Assaultron heads, and mixed arm weapons like blades, lasers, guns, and other mods. There's a ton of possible robot combinations, and I think that the scrapped and jury-rigged designs of them look really good and fit in really well with Fallout 4's aesthetics. After destroying these robo-ops, we discovered that we came too late, and all the human members of the caravan have been killed, leaving only their custom bot and main companion of this DLC, Ada, as the sole survivor of the attack. We speak to Ada, and she tells us that her caravan has been getting consistently jumped by these strange robots, and that the robots were being created by someone called the Mechanist. We can pick up the Mechanist holotape from one of the destroyed iBots to learn more about this new villain of the DLC. The Mechanist proclaims themselves as a new hero of the Wasteland, and wants to usher in a, quote, age of peace with their mishmash robot army, who will fight for and help the people of the Commonwealth until it is free of evil and violence. Plan sounds all fine and dandy, but if that's the case, then why are these robots sliding on peaceful traders with deadly force? Something isn't adding up here. But for now, we gotta plan our next move. Ada tells us she wants revenge on the Mechanist for killing her friends, and she teams up with us to defeat the Mechanist. Ada tells us that a group of these new bots have been spotted near the General Atomics factory, and we ought to go check it out. We head on over to the factory and fight more robots, and after a quick sweep of the factory, we fight the first boss of this DLC, the Quantum Robo-Brain, which is the first Robo-Brain you fight in all of Fallout 4, as Robo-Brains were added as part of this DLC, and I'll talk more about them a bit later. I blow the dome off of the Robo-Brain, who for some reason is locked in a caged area at the end of the factory, which requires you to use a terminal to open the maglock door to get into. So if you wanted to fight this Quantum Robo-Brain like a real man, mano a mano, you have to use the terminal to intentionally open the doors to let him out to fight. But you can also just shoot through the fenced walls to kill him while he's still locked up with his legendary enemy robot buddy. I'm not sure if this was intentional or not, but being able to shoot through the cage walls trivializes the fight completely. So I'm not quite sure if the Robo-Brain was supposed to spawn inside of it or not. But tangent aside, we loot the robot's body for the Mechanist device to give to Ada. Ada tells us that it is a radar beacon that the Mechanist was using to track the Robo-Brain, and that Ada can use this beacon to hopefully figure out the Mechanist's location. But we'd have to install it on her with a robot workbench first, which introduces the biggest addition this DLC contains, the robot companion crafting. Building the robot workbench back at our base unlocks the ability to modify Ada, as well as the ability to create our own robot companion automatrons from scratch. This new building system, like all the other crafting systems in Fallout 4, is surprisingly deep and customizable. Every part of the robot companions is customizable, from the robot's head down to his legs. The robot body parts can be either crafted or picked up from robots you destroy throughout the DLC, which is a really cool concept, taking parts of your slain enemies to build a Frankenstein robot out of their corpses. But in practice, the robots usually only drop one random component at a time, and it will require a ton of looting and robot smashing to actually build a new robot just out of looted pieces. So resources are still much needed for robot creation. And if you want to get the most out of robot building, you'll need to invest heavily in crafting perks like Science, Robots Expert, Armor, Blacksmith, and Gun Nut. So you'll need a brain and build like Yakub's to unlock all the possible robot mods. Not only can you combine pretty much any robot part with any other part, you can also modify robot body part armor with multiple tiers of armor and other aesthetic upgrades like skull heads for your bots for extra layers of robot creation. Despite the fairly sizable skill and resource overhead, the robot building is a pretty great feature. It's super modular and lets you make any kind of robot you can think of. Just check out some guys I built like Hunter and Tom here. And I'm only scratching the surface of what you can build with these guys. It's really well done, and I'm impressed with its modularity. After installing the beacon on Ada, she says she can't determine the Mechanist's whereabouts yet, but she was able to pick up a signal to another Robo-Brain that's carrying another beacon. And if we can gather up 2 more beacons, Ada should be able to triangulate the Mechanist's location. So we head off to the location she marked for us on our map, and destroy the marked Robo-Brain and his entourage. Pick up the radar beacon, give it to Ada. Ada tells us that we're getting closer to the Mechanist, and that in the meantime, while she works on decrypting the beacon signal, she has one more Robo-Brain signal for us to check out, which is at the Fort Hagen satellite array, which Ada tells us is occupied by the Rust Devils, a raider gang that are obsessed with robots, using them as attack bots and using their parts as armor, which is a new armor set this DLC introduces, the robot armor. We jog on over to the array and shoot up the Rust Devils and their evil-looking robots, and penetrate into their base. The Rust Devils, at least design-wise, are a cool idea for this DLC. They fight using their own custom robots, which have a much more menacing design than names like the Doom Protectron and the Devil Bots with human skull heads. And their camp is full of hanging and skewered robot corpses and bags of robot scrap that look like the Super Mutant Gore bags. But besides these fun design choices, the Rust Devils don't have much else going for them. We don't know anything about their history or why they're obsessed with robots, or what their overarching goals are and why, or who they're led by. They, like all other Bandit or Raider factions in Bethesda games, are very underdeveloped, and only really exist to be ops the player can shoot at. Don't expect to be able to join or work alongside the Rust Devils. They're just here to get shot at. Once we reach the end of the Satellite Array dungeon, which to be fair is a decently large and challenging dungeon, we encounter a Robo-Brain hooked up to a large computer named Jezebel. who has been captured by the Rust Devils who tried to use her to find the Mechanist, same as us. Jezebel tells us that along with finding the Mechanist's location, we'd also need to gain access to the facility, which she can help us with if we get her out of the Rust Devil's base and build her a new body. So we pick up Jezebel's brain tank, which activates the intimidating robot Ahab from his robot death throne at the back of the room. The Ahab fight is a bit short, but I really enjoyed this fight. He's a custom sentry bot, and his design looks really cool with the sharp jagged metal armor and the skull for a head. And he sprays fireballs all across the room, and the effects look really sweet. Using my lore-accurate Desert Eagle, we sink Ahab and fight our way out of the array, taking out Ivy and stealing her sweet Tesla power armor and Tesla rifle, a new weapon added by the DLC that shoots electric bolts at enemies. That's alright. Back at my base, I build a new automatron for Jezebel to inhabit, the Tom Brady 1.0 robot. Pleased with her new body and her new status as a systems quarterback, Jezebel reveals to us that the Mechanist had tasked Jezebel and the other robots with finding and helping the people of the Commonwealth. One problem though. Jezebel and the other Robo-Brains had a different idea for helping people than the Mechanist did. Due to flaws in their logic, the Robo-Brains determined that the best way to help Commonwealth citizens would be to just straight up kill them, as they're likely to die from other factors anyway, resulting in the Mechanist robots terrorizing the Commonwealth citizens. Jezebel also tells us that in order to access the Mechanist layer, we will need to install an MSAT mod on one of our robots. Jezebel then sort of just falls into the background of the DLC, remaining at our base but rendered essentially useless because she's given us the exposition spiel she existed for. So we tell Ada what we learned and install the MSAT, and some new legs, on her, and we learn that the Mechanist layer is hidden within the Robco Sales and Service Center, so we head on over. Once inside, we use the MSAT on the strange device on the wall, which opens up several doors. I've always been a fan of this gag. And we enter the belly of the beast. This final dungeon is actually pretty large and complex, and you can learn some pretty interesting lore about the Robo-Brains throughout. Terminal entries reveal that the Robo-Brains were being experimented on as a new step in robotic evolution that would use human brains as a central processor, which would hopefully make the robots more intelligent and more human-like. In order to develop the Robo-Brains, local criminals were held in captivity in the Robco building and had their brains extracted and placed into Robo-Brains against their will. However, the scientists were unable to complete their work in fully bridging the brains to their new robot bodies before the bombs fell, and the Robo-Brains remained functional, but severely logically flawed and prone to violent mishaps. We continue through the Mechanist layer, going through a large dumping room, prison facilities, research facilities, and so on until we reach the final chamber, and the Mechanist dramatically reveals themselves. Rocking the Mechanist suit from Fallout 3, the Mechanist slanders us as a villain, and then sicks their robot army to attack us in a final battle. We fight off waves of robots in a fairly challenging final arena battle. Most of the difficulty coming from a strong-ass dual-bot that uses its dick-melting face laser, and playing on hard means that this attack can melt you in under 2 seconds, so I had to buff up on drugs to take it down. Once that powerful bot is defeated, the Mechanist, getting more and more desperate, starts throwing junk bots at you that die in only a few shots, as the auxiliary power continuously goes down. I really like this little touch. It gives the final fight a sense of momentum shifting onto our player, signaling that we're finally close to winning. Once the power finally blows, we confront the Mechanist again, who still condemns us as a villain for killing her robots. So we riz her to come down and talk to us face to face. The Mechanist takes off their helmet to reveal some lady. We tell her that her robots have been attacking and killing Commonwealth residents, and we aren't actually villains. She tells us that's impossible because she had commanded her robots to protect, and all of her testing with them had been successful. We inform her that the Robo-Brains were misinterpreting the orders and were saving people by killing them. The Mechanist finally sees the truth, and we tell her to stand down, and I let her live. She gives us the mainframe password and we shut down the robot mainframe, completing the Automatron questline. For our troubles, the Mechanist, who reveals herself as Isabel Cruz, gives us the Mechanist suit as a reward, and also opens out the ability to give us Radiant quests to hunt down rogue robots for extra parts and rewards. The story of Automatron overall is unfortunately pretty weak. The Mechanist not being aware of her robots killing the people she's trying to save doesn't make much sense. Has the Mechanist never followed up on what happened to the people the robots saved? Also, her base is full of clues and logs about how unstable and incomplete the Robo-Brain's logic is, and based on how smart the Mechanist seems to be, I feel like realistically she would have been able to foresee this logical issue with the Robo-Brains, or at least follow up on her field tests at all. The same goes for the rest of the characters of this DLC. Jezebel and the Rust Devils, despite having some pretty interesting design and setup, don't really go anywhere interesting. The Rust Devils have no development, lore, or motivation to speak of, and Jezebel, despite seeming to be a plotting, manipulative Robo-Brain when we first encounter her, serves to only deliver some exposition and then retreat from the story entirely. Ada is definitely the best character in this DLC, serving as a pretty good companion, but she's also pretty surface level, and her story effectively ends after the Mechanist is thwarted. Despite these issues, Automatron is still a surprisingly sturdy DLC. The robot crafting is deep and super modular, and you can lose tons and tons of hours building up, traveling with, and upgrading your robot buddies. The new quests and dungeons are also fairly expansive for the ones that are actually added, and they're actually pretty complex and dangerous, and is overall pretty enjoyable to play through, although the main questline itself is pretty brief. That coupled with the cool robot designs and the addition of the Robo-Brains, Automedron manages to justify its own existence just enough. But for now, let's move on to the next DLC, Far Harbor. DLC number 3, Far Harbor. Far Harbor returns to the established Fallout DLC formula, taking us to a new area known as The Island. Far Harbor isn't the name of the island, it's the name of the town on the island. That's a common misconception, don't get confused. This island is based off of the real-life Mount Desert Island, a small island off the coast of Maine. To access the island, we get a radio message from the Valentine Detective Agency, and when we arrive, we get a case to find a girl, Kasumi Nakano, who had gone missing from her parents' fishing estate. After heading on over to the Nakano residence, which I must say is a pretty nice house all things considered, these people have a well-kept 2-story home and a large boathouse. I think they're living better than most pre-war people did. Mr. Nakano must be one hell of a fisherman. We talk to the Nakanos and investigate their house, and through note and holotape hunting we learned that Kasumi had made contact with a synth settlement via a radio she had fixed up, and she had begun to believe herself to be a synth through contact with them. Eventually convinced that she was indeed a synth, Kasumi took the family boat to Far Harbor to make contact with them. We relayed this info to the Nakanos, and Mr. Nakano offers us his sweet self-driving boat to take us to Far Harbor. So we hop on the boat and sail to Far Harbor, starting the DLC in earnest. Far Harbor starts out very similar to the Fallout 3 expansion Point Lookout, arriving at the island via boat as you pass by the gloomy, rocky island. Its dark, oppressive atmosphere setting a strong tone as you slowly pull into the dock of a harbor town. We hop onto the dock and talk to 2 of the harbor men, Avery and Alan, who are either cautious or just hostile towards our presence. We tell them that we're looking for a girl named Kasumi, and Avery confirms that she had passed through, but there's no time to chat. Monsters are coming out of the all-surrounding fog to attack the town. So we join in on the fight, slaughtering some new attacking enemies, the Gulpers, who are large mutated Deathclaw salamander hybrid creatures, and an Angler, a large land-dwelling anglerfish beast. This DLC introduces a bunch of new mutated monsters, such as the aforementioned Gulpers and Anglers, but also Fog Crawlers, which are massive mutated shrimp, and my new favorite monster, the Hermit Crabs, which are overgrown hermit crabs that use trucks for their shells to hide their massive bodies. And they also added a new gothic, evil-looking Mirelurk variant called the Blood Rage Mirelurk. I really like these new monster types, and besides maybe the Angler, they all fit really well with the northeastern coastal theme really well. After exterminating the attacking monsters, we talk to Avery to learn more about Far Harbor's predicament. She tells us about the Fog, a misty, bluish, radioactive syphilis cloud that covers the island. It's kind of like its hepatitis cloud cousin from the Sierra Madre. Nobody knows where the cloud originates from, and the cloud is responsible for mutating the local wildlife into the mutated monsters we fight throughout the DLC, and the monsters are lurking all throughout the fog, forcing the harbormen to retreat from inland and fortify themselves in Far Harbor, using those odd-looking pylons called fog condensers to keep the fog from enveloping the town and overrunning them. The harbormen blame the fog spread on the nearby Children of Adam settlement, religious fanatics who worship radiation itself and worship a god fittingly called Adam. By extension of this belief, the children venerate the island's fog as some holy manifestation of Adam, which puts them at odds with the harbormen, who believe the children be somehow spreading the fog. If this disagreement wasn't enough already, tensions between the children and the harbormen had been ready to blow since Alan had killed the Children of Adam missionary who had gone to their town to try and convert them, and Alan, pissed off at the preacher's rhetoric and fueled by his hatred of the children, put a cap in the preacher's ass, killing him. This setup is a pretty good start to Far Harbor, despite the harbormen being a fairly generic faction of hardy survivors and slightly xenophobic New England-style fishermen. Their conflict with the Children of Adam is set up pretty well, and their disagreement over the fog is a serious issue. Moving on, Avery tells us that Kasumi had traveled to the synth-only settlement of Arcadia, which is an old observatory in the middle of the island, and will need a guide to bring us there through the syphilis cloud. This guide is a new companion, Old Longfellow, an old hunter and island guide. He's an okay companion. I really only use him for the first excursion to Arcadia and then leave him be. Longfellow leads us through the fog, fighting some trappers along the way, them being this DLC's Rust Devil's equivalent, that being underdeveloped cannibal raiders with a northeastern fisherman aesthetic to them. They also just exist to get shot at. Don't expect any interesting lore interactions with them. The stroll we take with Longfellow gives us a good overview of Far Harbor. We fight monsters, learn more about the fog, and how in the past it has expanded and retreated seemingly at random, and we encounter a Child of Adam cultist that we can learn more about the cult from. Once we reach Arcadia, I leave Longfellow and go pick up Nick Valentine, as he has an important role in this DLC. With Nick in tow, we head inside and talk to the real main character of this DLC, a unique synth named Dima. Dima may be the best written character in all of Fallout 4. He's a mysterious, soft-spoken synth with several bulbs and fuses protruding from his upper back and head. He tells us that Kasumi is here and safe with him, but then Nick butts in, and Dima is shocked to see him. Dima tells Nick that he and him are sort of brothers, them both being prototype synths, with Dima being a synth who was to develop a personality based on his experiences, whereas Nick was a synth who they would attempt to transfer an entire personality onto, and that involved Nick getting his memory wiped constantly after each test. Dima, unable to continue watching Nick lose his identity and feeling a close connection to him, helped Nick escape the Institute alongside himself. Unfortunately for Dima, Nick doesn't remember this event or Dima at all, as his synth processors had long forgotten this event, as it had taken place about 100 years ago. Regardless, Dima asks us if we think Kasumi is a synth, to which we are unsure of. I'm not sure if Dima knows either, or if he does know and he's just testing our player in Kasumi, but I feel like Dima should be able to know, even if the 3rd generation Siths are grown from biological material rather than built from metal parts. I feel like he should have had some method for detecting the synth parts they still have. But this is just an autistic lore nitpick I have. Dima also questions if we're a synth ourselves, which is an interesting thought experiment, but falls flat because that would be completely impossible unless Sean had hot swapped us with a synth copy of our player character while we were frozen in a Vault 111 cryopod. But that seems unlikely. Once we're done chatting with Dima, we go talk to Kasumi, who refuses to leave because she's still convinced that she is a synth. But after Kasumi had done some maintenance work on Dima's systems, she had become suspicious of him, and she believes he may be planning something or hiding some dark secret, as she had found references for the fog engulfing the island and a nuclear detonation in his memory banks. So Kasumi tasks us with figuring out what Dima may be hiding. And this is where Far Harbor makes an unprecedented change. This quest actually has multiple solutions. I can't fucking believe it. Actual RPG gameplay in my Bethesda game. It must be Christmas. Hallelujah. To complete this quest, you can either eavesdrop on Dima and his close advisors, convince him to tell you directly via speech checks, or hack Faraday's terminal using hacking skills. Although it's pretty small, just the fact that you're able to use speech checks to complete quest objectives is an extremely welcome change. It's hard to think that we haven't really had this since New Vegas. And even though I had low charisma and was unable to take advantage of these checks, just the fact that they're here at all is amazing. After failing to get Nick to hack the Master Lock terminal, and failing to riz Dima into telling us the truth, I get the storage room key and listen in on Dima and his advisor's conversation. From this conversation, we learn that Dima is very concerned about a conflict breaking out between Far Harbor and the Children of Adam. Dima is protective of both of them by building the fog condensers for the Harbormen and giving the children his old home of a nearby submarine base as a place for them to build their religion. We also learn that the children's current leader, a man called High Confessor Tectus, usurped the previous confessor and former friend of Dima's, a man named Martin, who was a much more moderate leader. They fear Tectus may start a conflict with both Arcadia and Far Harbor over his religious zealotry, and they don't trust his judgment. Finally, Dima reveals that some of his memories are stored in the children's sub-base, and he had left them there as a token of his trust with the children. Faraday reveals he has a program that he's been working on that will retrieve Dima's memories, so we snag that holotape and confront Dima about what we heard. Dima agrees to let us go to the sub-base. Since we aren't a part of Arcadia, the children wouldn't see it as an aggressive act from them. So off we go to the sub-base to retrieve his memories. When we arrive at the sub-base, we witness a child of Adam ass blast another child, and we speak to the doorman, Grand Zealot Richter, who won't let us in unless we perform a ritual, which involves drinking irradiated water from a nasty-ass radioactive spring. We drink from the spring and start geeking hard almost immediately. A gangrenous filter clouds the screen and a shadowy figure appears before us. We follow the radiation hallucination until we reach an old bunker, unlock the terminal, and pick up a strange wooden figure of a woman. We return to Richter, who is shocked by our discovery of the figure, making him believe that we certainly must have some special purpose. He lets us in to talk with the High Confessor and opens up the Children of Adam quest if that's the path you want to take. But for now, we head on inside. I want to quickly talk about the Children of Adam as a faction. The Children of Adam started in Fallout 3, being a religion started by an old coot named Confessor Cromwell, a disheveled old man who worshipped the undetonated bomb in the center of Megaton. Between Fallout 3 and 4, the religion has seemingly spread quite a bit, being practiced in the Commonwealth and as far north as coastal Maine. The children we encounter in the DLC are just one sect of the greater religion, which appears to be wholly decentralized. From a meta standpoint, the cult is pretty great, being a joke religion that expanded way beyond what anyone would have thought, and it becomes strong enough to pose a serious threat on the island. However, in practice, I feel like this faction could have been handled better. They're almost too dumb and too meta at times. They worship radiation as a vague concept, and seem to resent ghouls, but I feel like ghouls would be way more venerated by the children, as ghouls who don't go feral can seemingly live indefinitely, and can heal and receive sustenance from just radiation alone. These are real, solid, almost supernatural abilities that I think the cult would make more sense in trying to achieve, as they may see it as power given to them from Adam, but at a cost. Also, although it seems some children of Adam are immune to radiation, many are not, and they must be treated regularly with Radaway and Rad-X, or else they'll die from the poisoning. And I feel it could be hard to recruit members into your religion that are actively harmed by the thing you're worshipping. But maybe I'm just wrong about this, and that's just how religion gets some people. But regardless, we move on. We walk in while Tectus is giving a sermon, talking big about spanking the Harbormen for their godlessness and hatred of the glorious syphilis fog. We speak with Tectus, who reaffirms his hatred for Far Harbor and gives us access to Dima's memories because of our vision and our potential from our visions of the Mother Deity. After a short fight with the remaining base robots and defenses, and getting my face melted by another Assaultron, we make it into Dima's memories, and we enter one of the most baffling things I've ever seen in a Bethesda game. Probably in any game ever, actually. I genuinely have no idea what they were thinking with this. After interacting with the terminal, you're teleported to this blocky cyber world, and your first task is to clear a path to a large orange cyber pillar with green laser blocks. And clearing the path to the pillar is the main puzzle of this mode. The pillar is accessed by these small green bugs that slowly walk to the pillar and then return to their home pillar to extract Dima's data. But as they return, small spherical drones will attack them, and you have to put down turrets to protect them in a sort of tower defense mode. But the tower defense is piss easy, and the 5 turrets you're provided for each level is more than enough defense. This section of the DLC is frankly ass. It's poop. It's shit from a butt. What were they thinking? Almost every part of this section is designed to waste time. You have to complete 5 levels of this shit. You have to use the clunky workshop menu to place blocks, and that's your only interaction with the mode. The bugs move slow and their AI is absolutely brain dead. Many times the bugs would just stop in their tracks for extended periods of time. You have to just sit and wait until their AI reactivates and they move forward again. Every puzzle besides the last one is very simple and boring, and you're mostly just walking around and waiting. On the final puzzle, I solved it on complete accident as I was trying to get the laser to point it where I needed it to. I'm not sure if I placed it properly or if the game just said, fuck it, you've been here long enough, you're good, and let me out. But no matter the reason, I was just glad it was over. This portion of the DLC is just absolute nonsense. And some of my chatters told me they believe this part was added in by Bethesda solely for padding out the main quest. And I'm inclined to agree, as this shit took me 50 minutes to complete, and after you finish the mission, you're pretty much in the Far Harbor endgame, and you'll be empowered to determine the island's fate at this point. From Dima's memories that we extracted, we learned that he had put contingencies in place to destroy either Far Harbor or the Children of Adam if one of them were to act up. These contingencies were the ability to shut off the fog condenser systems that the Harbormen use, which if activated would lead them to be consumed by the fog, and a launch key for the nuclear warhead that's still in the submarine within the children's base. We also learned from Dima's memories that Dima was having trouble with the Harbormen, and in order to pacify them, he had planned to kill and replace one of their citizens with a synth who would moderate tensions and advocate for Arcadia in an unsuspicious manner. We fight through the Vim Pop factory and access a hidden bunker with a buried corpse inside, along with a holotape. Turns out Avery, the first Harborman we talked to, was Dima's planted synth. Dima had killed, buried, and replaced her with a synth, and had removed the memory from his databanks as he couldn't live with his actions. We return to Dima, confront him, again, about his contingencies and his murder of Avery. It's here that we can make a choice on whether to keep his secret or tell Far Harbor the truth, and amazingly, this is actually an interesting conundrum to solve. On one hand, Dima was wrong and evil to kill an innocent woman and replace her, but his reasoning is pretty compelling, and from talking with the Harbormen, we see that Avery is the only one who isn't eager to start a massive conflict on the island. She may have been the reason things haven't exploded yet. On the other hand, you can tell Far Harbor the truth, which may be right on the surface, but this will cause them to retaliate violently against Arcadia, which would endanger all of its residents and Kasumi herself, the reason why we're here at all. If your charisma is high enough, you can convince Dima to stand trial in Far Harbor, which either ends up in Dima being killed and the Harbormen assaulting Arcadia, or only Dima being killed, but the player convincing the town to stand down, which you can convince them to do if you've done their quests and gained their trust, making the player's actions throughout the DLC actually meaningful. Finally, if you keep his secret and don't have him stand trial, you'll unlock a third solution, which is a plan to kill and replace Tectus with a more calmed and moderate synth version of himself. You collect some of Martin's old holotapes and Dima will create a doctored recording to scare Tectus into thinking Martin is coming back for his spot as High Confessor. After using your fake news on Tectus, you kill him and have him replaced with a synth, which allows you to complete the main quest without nuking a faction off the map, being the quote good ending of the questline. The final portion of the main quest is actually amazing in just how much agency you have over the fate of the island. You can destroy all, none, or some of the factions, and there are many options for destroying them. You can even go back to the Commonwealth to alert either the Brotherhood or the Institute to come wipe out Arcadia, or if you want to destroy the Children of Adam, you can get the key and manually destroy their base, or you can convince Tectus to trigger the bomb himself, and trigger the division they all want. It's excellent. This is unprecedented for a Bethesda-designed game, and displays a ton of potential for their future games and player choice-centered designs moving forward. I've literally never seen dialogue options matter this much since New Vegas, all the way back in 2011. Once you've either eradicated the faction of your choice, or completed Dima's Tectus replacement plan to ease tensions, the main story of Far Harbor is essentially finished. In my case, I decided to blow the Children of Adam to smithereens for having silly beliefs. In doing so actually snags you a reward from Alan, as you just have cooked his dreaded ops for good. Once that's done, we can grab Kasumi, if she's still alive that is. You can get a bad ending with the Nakanos if she's killed in the raid on Arcadia, which is another awesome feature. And we bring her home to finish the main questline of Far Harbor. That's not all there is to Far Harbor, as each faction has a healthy supply of side quests to complete, which involve helping build up Far Harbor's defenses, helping this lady resolve some family history, fighting waves of Mirelurks in the Captain's Dance to prove yourself to the Harbormen, fight the adorable Red Death, and so on. There's plenty of faction quests to do, and the rewards are all pretty good. Usually either getting a unique weapon or a hefty sum of caps for your efforts, and they'll take you all over the island's interesting locations. There's even a Vault murder mystery side quest that may or may not have been stolen from a Fallout 3 mod. But stolen or not, it's still an interesting side quest with a uniquely themed vault and some solid dialogue and storytelling. Overall, Far Harbor is definitely in the top 3 Bethesda DLCs of all time. This may be their best expansion since Shivering Isles. The story is intricate, and your choices actually matter, and the amount of agency the devs give you is a promising sign for the future. I really hope Starfield follows and expands on this type of quest design. That, coupled with the bevy of side content in the dense and dangerous island, we have everything we need for a great DLC, and that Far Harbor is. My only issues are the aforementioned bizarre and drawn-out memory extraction section, the surprisingly short main quest, and the fairly underdeveloped factions. If the main quest was a bit longer and the factions had a bit more depth, we may have had the GOAT Bethesda DLC on our hands. I'm serious. But for now, let's leave Far Harbor and head on over to the final DLC, Nuka World. DLC number 4, Nuka World. The last DLC release for Fallout 4, Nuka World, takes us to the titular soda-based theme park, which has been overrun with raiders, who have turned one of its 5 parks into a stronghold. Listening to the Nuka World family radio points us towards the Nuka World Transit Center, where after clearing some gunners and entering, we encounter an injured man named Harvey, who claims raiders have his family held captive in Nuka World, and begs us to rescue them. He's a little suspicious, but there's a plot we have to continue, so we cautiously agree to help and take the tram to Nuka World. As the tram passes by Nuka World, we listen to the automated PA until we receive a transmission from some guy named Porter Gage, who tells us that we've been duped by Harvey's story and are on our way to a death trap, and that he may be able to help us if we survive. After we arrive, we enter a gauntlet that was booby-trapped out the ass by Nuka World Raiders, which was built to entertain the local raider factions. This gauntlet isn't playing around either. It's pretty long. These raiders must have spent thousands and thousands of man-hours building this thing. I wonder if these raiders have backgrounds in construction. A union, maybe? This gauntlet is full of explosive traps, plenty of turrets, and my XO1 power armor I came in on was shredded by the end of it. Once we reach the end of the gauntlet, we enter a bumper cars area, where the current Nuka World overboss, Coulter, is prepping his power armor suit that's connected to the ceiling like a bumper car, which charges his power armor up and makes him practically unkillable. Luckily for us though, Gage tells us that he has prepared a weapon for us to take down Coulter with, a Nuka-Cola squirt gun. The squirt gun will cause his electrified armor to fry, leaving Coulter exposed. I actually really like this first section of the DLC. The gauntlet is properly dangerous and longer than you think it would be, setting the tone of this DLC to have some late game combat challenges. And the usage of the squirt gun to take down Coulter is a pretty fun idea, and makes the fight really unique, setting the silly, off-the-wall tone having this DLC take place in a theme park lends itself to really well. We squirt on Coulter and then pump his ass full of hot, steamy lead until he's a fully cooked product. With Coulter dead, despite us being here for only about 20 minutes, Gage declares us the new overboss of Nuka World, and speaking to him reveals that they were planning on killing Coulter for a while, as they had grown unsatisfied with his rule. Coulter had rallied the 3 main raider gangs in this expansion under his command, the Pack, the Disciples, and the Operators, and took over Nuka World USA from the traders living there, and made it their new raider kingdom. Dissatisfied with Coulter's lack of will to venture into and capture the 4 remaining Nuka World parks, as he wanted to sit on his laurels and spend his days killing travelers in his power armor instead, Gage schemed with the other gangs to have Coulter killed and replaced with a more ambitious leader, who conveniently is us. Gage tells us to come to Fishtop Mountain to speak with him to learn more. It's at this point we're finally cut loose into Nuka World, and for now, we'll head towards Fishtop Mountain to kick off the DLC's main quest. Along the way, we run into that charlatan Harvey, who coyly tries to apologize to me. I wasn't having it. We also run into Fallout 3's very own Sierra Petrovita, the lady who ran the Nuka-Cola Museum back in the Capital Wasteland, and you can do a quest for her that involves some dude trying to fuck her, remember? Anyway, Sierra is searching for something she doesn't want to tell us about yet, so for now we're tasked with getting her a Nuka-Cola quartz to gain her trust. After chatting up Sierra, we head over to the Fishtop Grill, where the player's main base in the DLC is located. We speak to Gage, who tells us that we need to reclaim the 4 remaining Nuka World areas for the Raiders, and to drive out whatever abominations or ops that may be living there. And since Coulter was too busy working on his gauntlet and messing around with his power armor to reclaim the rest of the park, the task now falls to us. But before all of that, we need to go talk to the leaders of the 3 Nuka World gangs, and unfortunately, these gangs are very weak as actual interesting factions. There's the Pack, a violent survival of the fittest mentality gang that dress colorfully like clowns and love to watch animal fights, led by their alpha, Mason. There's the Operators, a more classic style mobster gang that dress in robotic suit pieces and put money over all else, led by Mags Black and her brother. Finally, there's the Disciples, who are overly sadistic and violent and prefer to fight with knives and blades over guns, and dress in jagged metallic outfits. They pretty much have the same philosophy as the Pack, but are edgier, literally. These factions really fail to impress. What you see is pretty much what you get with these guys, and their bosses just stay cooped up in their respective zones and exist mostly to provide radiant quest objectives to the player. There isn't much at all in terms of development, and you can't really learn more about these gangs beyond the initial introduction, and you can't align or join one gang in particular. They're mostly just window dressing, unfortunately. I think it just may be impossible for Bethesda to write a good raider or evil faction. I think Todd is just too nice. After introducing ourselves to all the gang leaders, we talk with Gage, who tells us it's time to get to work. The remaining zones need to be captured, and when they're cleared out, we must plant a flag and assign a gang to occupy the new area we just cleared. These worlds are Kitty Kingdom, Dry Rock Gulch, Safari Adventure, and the Nuka World Bottling Plant. Exploring and clearing out these worlds is where Nuka World is at its strongest. Bethesda went ham on pulling out all the theme park attractions and tropes. Nuka World takes tons of inspiration from Disney and Hershey Park, having its own Animal Kingdom ripoff, an America-themed entrance park, a Matterhorn clone, a Western-styled zone that calls back to Disney's Frontierland and Big Thunder Mountain Ride. Nuka-Cola bottle and cap mascots have a strong resemblance to the Hershey Park mascots, along with the sycophantic founder worship of John Caleb Bradberton, the inventor of Nuka-Cola. Kind of like how they revere a guy named Walter in real life. There's even a company town called Bradberton. They got literally everything covered here. There's also a Nuka Arcade, which have some simple minigames, which aren't super compelling, but a nice addition to have nonetheless. From here, Gage is unlocked as a companion and we take control of the parks in any order we want. I first went to Kitty Kingdom, which is overrun with ghouls and sprayers spewing out radioactive green fart gas all throughout the park. As you travel through the kingdom, you're accosted over an intercom by assumedly a ghoul, who mocks you and preys hard on your downfall. In order to find this ghoul, we head through a funhouse complete with a mirror maze, a spinning tube room, an inverted house, and a room with a spinning floor surrounded by several doors that open to some pretty humorous scenes and extra loot. It's a pretty fun little dungeon. We also search through the maintenance tunnels, and reading logs throughout these buildings reveals what's going on. Kitty Kingdom is inhabited by former park employees who took shelter there when the nukes dropped. Through these logs, we learned that the survivors slowly became feral over time, save for a few people. In the theater, we meet the last survivor of the original group, a glowing one ghoul magician named Oswald the Outrageous. He can revive killed ghouls and can also teleport somehow. I don't recall this being a known ghoul ability. We defeat him, but he escapes, telling us to meet him on the roof of King Cola's castle. When we reach the top, I try and fail to convince him to leave, as he is still holding on to hope that his friend Rachel, who had left in search of a cure for the ghoul's ferality, will return with a cure. Failing to convince him, and after a fight where he revives a few times, I pop his head like a water balloon and put him down for good. Later on in my playthrough though, I actually ran into Rachel's corpse in Bradberton, and I found a holotape recording her last moments, where she admits that there isn't a cure to the ferality, and she has decided to kill herself as she slowly became more and more feral. Before she dies, she pleads with Oswald to give up on the cure and to leave the park for good. You can use this holotape to convince Oswald to leave if you find it before you confront him, but the way in which I found it created a uniquely tragic yet wholly organic gameplay moment, and knowing that I killed Oswald makes the moment feel really somber, and I think I prefer it that way. Regardless, after killing Oswald, we can now claim the park and assign a raider faction to it. And this feature, like the rest of the raider involved features, is pretty shallow. Assigning a park to a gang won't gain you any extra favors or special rewards with them. The game just spawns a bunch of them in the park that you just captured where they just wander around aimlessly, and the only real reward being a loot chest you can pilfer in the captured park. The main goal of this feature is to determine which gang will turn on you at the end of the main quest. Whichever gang is given the least amount of real estate will turn on you and occupy the power plant of Nuka World, and it's basically nothing more than a running tally to determine who your final opposition will be. Anyway, moving on to Galactic World has us fighting Nuka-Cola themed robots and gathering up parts for a large computer control system called Star Control. Star Control is made up of 35 collectible star cores, items that are found all throughout the park. You'll need 20 of them to complete the Galactic World quest, and 35 to unlock the display case in the center of the room that has some sweet quantum-themed power armor. To complete the first part to get the initial 20 star cores, you'll have to visit the Galactic Zone attractions, the Theater, the Robco Battle Zone, Nuka Galaxy, and Vault-Tec Among the Stars, all of which have a handful of star cores within them. These attractions are pretty interesting. The Theater is self-explanatory. The Robco Battle Zone has a fun gimmick that involves you getting trapped in the robot battle arena and having to fight for your survival in waves. Nuka Galaxy is the most interesting place of them all, being an indoor roller coaster similar to Space Mountain. That's also a light gun ride with animatronic aliens and UFOs shooting at you. I don't know if this is how the ride was supposed to be pre-war. If so, these kids would have been getting killed in combat with the real and live laser turrets. And Vault-Tec Among the Stars is an interesting exhibit from Vault-Tec that advertises their plans to build vaults on other planets. Also, from this place, I think I can safely call Vault-Tec the most cartoonishly evil corporation ever, as they couldn't even resist running human experiments in a public attraction, releasing radiation, subliminal audio messaging, and genetically modified flora throughout the facility to test its effects on the minds of visitors and staff. Vault-Tec's greed for tests is insane, and they really just couldn't help themselves. Despite these interesting locations, our goal here is still to scrounge up star cores, and finding 20 of them was a little tedious. But once we got the required number of star cores, we power up the mainframe and power down the Nuka-Cola bots, whose designs I really like. The Mr. Frothy and Nukatrons especially. They look like walking vending machines, and you can even loot them for their Nuka-Cola themed body parts to use on your automatrons. Nice touch. But with Galactic Zone capped, we move on to Dry Rock Gulch. Dry Rock Gulch is a bit more straightforward than the previous two parks, requiring us to wipe out the bloodworms infesting the park. The bloodworms are a new enemy added in this add-on. Pink, spiky penis monsters that jump up out of the ground to attack the player. They're certainly yucky looking, but they're also pretty weak, only taking 2 or 3 shots from my 10mm pistol to take down most variants of them. Their nest is inside of the Mad Mulligan's Mine ride, which is currently locked up and can only be opened by playing along with some Western-themed Protectrons that task you with some simple park tasks, like digging a giddy-up Buttercup out of the trash and dropping it in a pen, delivering Nuka-Cola to some thirsty skeletons, and having a duel with one of the Protectrons. Once we've got the key to the mine, we take a short walk through the ride, play with some worms and kill the Bloodworm Queen, and then report back to the Protectron Sheriff. And once that's done, the park is ours to claim. It's definitely the weakest park so far. It can be captured pretty quickly after a few small tasks, and the Bloodworms are pretty easy to kill unless you're fighting a legendary variant, but even then it's no big deal. So it's time to move on to the bottling plant. The World of Refreshment bottling plant is a bit unique from the other parks, as it doesn't have any story or tasks required outside of killing all the Nuka lurks in and around the building, but the plant's design more than makes up for that. The World of Refreshment is one of those company glazing rides like the one they got at Hershey Park, where it explains the company history and looks more like a mock factory for their products. The World of Refreshment has a really sweet looking interior with a glowing blue river of Nuka-Cola Quantum, and it's infested with some tough Mirelurk variants called the Nuka Lurks that have a cool blue glow to them. As you progress through the World of Refreshment, you pass by exhibits of the history of Nuka-Cola, and you can pick up a sweet set of Nuka-Cola themed T-51B power armor by hacking a terminal. Shit looks fire. Once you've massacred every living thing inside of the building, you move back on outside where you take on the Nuka Lurk Queen boss, and once she and her goons are dead, the plant is yours. That only leaves Safari Adventure. Safari Adventure, this DLC's parody of Animal Kingdom, is currently infested with a horde of gator claws, alligator deathclaw hybrids that were created by an animal cloning device hidden in the park's welcome center. Upon entering the park, we run into a man named Cedo, a Tarzan parody character who speaks in primitive caveman speak and was raised by gorillas within the park. He takes us to his gorilla family and explains the predicament the park is in with the gator claws. We team up with him to find the source of the gator claws, and we learn that we need a passcode from one of the former scientists of the Animal Replicator project to access it. We track down the remains of a Dr. Hein, who we learn was ambushed by animal rights activists and held hostage under the park's roller coaster. Using his password, we get into the cloning area, and from logs from the other scientist, McDermott, we learn that he had become ghoulified after the bombs dropped and was able to stay alive by using the animal cloning machine as a steady source of food. Bro was eating some real Beyond Meat. Eventually, McDermott got spooked by wasteland scavengers encroaching near the Safari Adventure Park and began working on an animal hybrid that could defend him and the park, the Gator Claws. Unfortunately for McDermott, however, the technology, like many other technologies in the Fallout series, ran amok. The Gator Claws became too violent and uncontrollable, and they grievously wounded and later killed McDermott, and the cloning machine continually made new Gator Claws until they completely overran the park. But thanks to us, we shut down the replicator and exterminate the remaining Gator Claws in the park. 21 in total. Once the Gator Claws are culled, we can capture the park, but not before we deal with Cedo. Now that we have pacified the park and saved Cedo's home, we tell him that raiders are moving in and he needs to fuck off, which he's surprisingly chill with. He packs his shit up and leaves, and with that, we've conquered all of Nuka World. From here we speak with Gage again, who tells us that it's time to set our sights on the Commonwealth, and to go talk to Shank to begin establishing raider settlements, the second portion of this DLC. The raider settlements expand on the settlement system even more, allowing you to build evil settlements that are inhabited by raiders. You set these settlements up by picking a settlement to target, and either shooting up or bribing the current residents to leave, and letting a gang of your choice take over. Once the settlement is captured, you'll then need to convince a nearby settlement to supply your new raider settlement with resources, which is achieved the same way as capturing a settlement. Either beat up or bribe the settlement's leader. Simple as. From there, you can build up your raider settlements and make your little goons happy and resolve issues and conflicts that occur at the raider settlement. It's essentially just a slightly modified normal settlement, but with more options for evil gameplay. In order to, quote, finish Nuka World, you need to create 3 raider settlements, and once that's done, the gang you've given the least amount of real estate to will go all Judas on your ass, and will do a hostile takeover of the power plant, where you'll wipe them and their leader out and turn on the power to Nuka World, unlocking some extra goodies throughout the park and turning on some of the rides. Just one problem with this though. To get to that ending, you need to spend a decent chunk of time building up your raider settlements and making sure they're happy. And whenever I'm tasked with building up settlements and keeping the residents happy, I just get extremely deflated. Like, goddamn, bruh, I really gotta build up all these settlements? I don't exactly got all day here. So instead of doing all that bullshit, I just decided to kill all the Nuka World raiders instead. If you head to the marketplace and speak to Mackenzie Bridgman, one of the former traders who was enslaved by the raiders, she will tell you about how it could be possible to slaughter all the Nuka World raiders, which unlocks the quest Open Season. In order to complete this quest and to get the good ending for Nuka World, you have to kill the 3 leaders of the gangs. So I got busy. Killing all the raider leaders isn't a small task either. Not only are the raiders incredibly spongy, seriously, when they pop a stim pack, they literally heal faster than you can damage them. They're also surrounded by their goons who are all strapped with the DLC exclusive handmade AK-47 rifles that do high damage and have a high fire rate. It's probably the toughest combat in the entire game. It was for me at least, up until that point. But because I'm such a beast of a gamer, I slaughtered all the leaders and slaughtered Gage too, as he will turn on you if you begin attacking the gangs, forcing you to put him down, which can be a pretty brutal proposition, especially if you had him follow you throughout the DLC like I did. Sorry I turned you into Swiss cheese, Gage, but it had to be done. But once they're all dead, you return to Mackenzie, who thanks you for releasing her from her chattel slavery, and resolves to keep Nuka World going as a trading post. And that's about it. Besides flipping the power back on if you haven't already, the story of Nuka World just kinda ends at this point. The raiders are dead, the now freed residents are thankful, but they don't really have much else to say. And although the quest itself is kinda shallow, and actually removes content from the game if you choose that path, but I'm still glad it's available as an option at all, and the fight to get this ending is actually very hardly fought and satisfying to accomplish, even if the resulting narrative is weak and a bit of a letdown. With the main quest complete, I'll cover some Nuka World side content, specifically Sierra's quests and the Hubologists. The Hubologists, which were a Scientology parody from Fallout 2, they even had an NPC parody of Tom Cruise named Juan Cruz. You can even do an auditing of your Thetans to increase your religion level with them. Have somehow made it all the way from San Francisco to central Massachusetts in search of a spacecraft. You speak to their leader, Dara Hubble, the self-proclaimed descendant of Hubology founder Dick Hubble, who's a parody of L. Ron Hubbard, who invites you to join the Hubologists and tasks you with getting them 5 spacesuits from the Galactic Zone. After giving them the spacesuits, we travel with them to clear out a junkyard and we reach our goal, an old spinning UFO ride. You know, the ones that make you stick to the wall? They're pretty fun. We repair the UFO and insert fusion cores in it for power, and this quest has a funny little twist to it. When you do this quest, pay attention to the fact that it tells you to only insert 3 cores, although the component has 4 empty slots. I put all 4 in because I didn't want to leave any holes unfilled. But that gave the UFO ride way too much power, and the Hubologists spun so fast their heads exploded. Shit. My bad, guys. I really like this result though. I didn't expect that to happen at all, and it really surprised me when it did. I guess I should have paid more attention. Overall, it's a pretty straightforward quest, but the callback to Fallout 2 and the unexpected ending really gives this quest a ton of charm. The other major side quest involves finding 10 letters from Cappy art hidden all over the park for Sierra, a clear reference to the hidden Mickey phenomena at Disney. While I like the concept of this quest in theory, in practice there aren't really any clues as to where the Cappies are located specifically, and without a guide of some kind, you could easily murder several hours you could have spent making your future brighter and your life better running around a digital theme park looking for hidden Cappies. So I can admit, without shame, that I just looked up a guide to their locations. Otherwise this video would have had to been delayed another month. There's also another reason why I looked up a guide, because the end of this quest is actually super interesting. Once you found all the Cappies and the letters for the passcode to Bradberton's office, the code is refreshing, by the way. Once inside, on his terminal, we learned that old JCB had begun neglecting the failing park systems, like letting Star Control continue to devolve, which caused the robots to go rogue, in favor of focusing on something called Project Cobalt, which would extend Bradberton's life. After finding a hidden button to a secret elevator, and console commanding Sierra to follow me after she got stuck on a vault catwalk, we enter a central chamber to find the frozen and preserved head of John Caleb Bradberton. This is a pretty hilarious reference to the popular rumor that Walt Disney was cryogenically frozen after his death in hopes of reviving him in the future, and that his frozen body was being stored somewhere in Disney World. Speaking to the head reveals that Bradberton had struck a deal with the US Army to artificially extend his life in exchange for the quantum technology he used to develop Nuka-Cola Quantum with. Bradberton was able to get his wish and live on after the war, but as a severed head in a frozen jar, alone in a fancy bunker for 200 years. Bradberton asks us to turn off the power and mercy kill him, whereas Sierra wants to keep him alive, as she idolizes the man who created her favorite thing on Earth. Killing him gives you access to a unique Fat Man called the Nuka Nuke launcher, which launches Nuka Nukes that explode into quantum blue mushroom clouds, whereas Sierra's reward is a Nuka-Cola jumpsuit. Sorry Sierra, but Cool Blue Bomb beats out Shirt any day of the week. I put Bradberton on ice for good and scoop up the Nuka Nuke launcher. Sierra will be upset with you, but in the end you give her the Nuka-Cola formula, which cheers her up. Siding with Sierra isn't a bad choice either, narratively speaking, as keeping Bradberton alive with his neurotic biggest fan may be a fate worse than death for him, which is pretty funny. It's unfortunate that this quest is locked behind a boring and drawn-out scavenger hunt though, as finding Bradberton's severed head and solving the subsequent dilemma of whether to kill him or not is some of the most interesting content in the entire expansion. Overall, Nuka World is a bit of a mixed bag. The expansion is just stuffed to the tits with fun and creative theme park ideas and locations to explore, and it was a ton of fun running into all the real-life theme park references and solving each of the park's issues. However, the story is extremely undercooked, and the Raider gang serve more as decoration than actual factions. And the overall writing of the DLC is pretty weak, outside of a few instances. I also found the Raider settlement systems to be uncompelling, and more of a slight modification of the settlements, rather than a proper expansion. Also, some of the more interesting content and armors are locked behind some drawn-out collectathon quests I just really couldn't be bothered to fully complete. Despite these issues, I found Nuka World itself to be pretty dense and interesting, and the Nuka-Cola themed armors, robots, weapons, and wide array of Nuka-Cola drinks really do wonders for this expansion's design aesthetics and interactions. And the late game combat feels challenging and engaging. And with that, that's every modern Fallout DLC examined. Now it's time to give my final ranking on these bastards and crown our DLC god. In last place in the worst DLCs of the modern Fallout series, we got the Workshop DLCs. Again, just no. Just no. I can't do it, man. I can't. In 12th place, we've got Operation Anchorage. It's just the weakest non-Workshop DLC. Short campaign, shallow and simplistic systems, and a lack of a compelling story really hamstring this DLC. Its only saving grace being the pretty awesome rewards like the unbreakable winterized power armor and stealth suit, along with a handful of cool moments. But besides those, it's the worst of the Fallout of Duty style DLCs. In 11th place, we've got Mothership Zeta. While it's definitely a step up from Operation Anchorage, with cool alien theming and weapons and less restrictive gameplay, it still suffers from the same pitfalls. Linear, repetitive gameplay, a surprisingly weak story and characters, and not much to really do outside of playing Fallout and Duty with a sci-fi skin on. And these factors force me to put it here. And in 10th place, we've got Automatron. Automatron has a very modular and surprisingly deep robot companion crafting system that you could dump hours into making the Tom Brady robot of your dreams, and has a solid amount of fun ideas. most notably the ability to take robot parts from slain robots to use in your own robot crafting. But outside of the titular Automatron crafting system, this DLC is pretty lean in all other aspects. Automatron only adds 2 or 3 new locations to explore, and has a pretty weak main villain and a pretty bare-bones story, and it barely justifies its DLC status, making me place it here. And in 9th place, we've got Broken Steel. It's definitely the best of the Fallout of Duty style DLCs, having some pretty great spectacle and several large and difficult locations to fight your way through, along with some short but pretty fun side quests that do some good world building following the main story of Fallout 3. Besides that, the gameplay is mostly straightforward Enclave op slaying, and the story is unfortunately pretty underwhelming. The Enclave and Brotherhood don't get expanded on any meaningful ways, and the story is essentially the Lone Wanderer killing 30,000 unnamed, faceless Enclave soldiers and blowing their base up at the end. We don't even get a Colonel Spring or someone to have a final duel with, which leads me to rank it here. And in 8th place, we've got Honest Hearts. Please don't kill me. An absolutely amazing story setup and character of Joshua Graham, the super unique location of Zion National Park, and some great DLC weapons such as the Compliance Regulator, a light shining in darkness, and the Survivalist Rifle, which, in your search for it, will uncover one of the greatest and maybe one of the most moving sub-stories in the entire Fallout series, are all held back by a short, underwhelming main story, simplistic quests, and underdeveloped factions. This, coupled with a surprising lack of side content, really crippled this DLC from reaching its full potential. Joshua is teasing us here, just giving us a taste when we needed the whole load, and it forces me to put Honest Hearts here. In 7th place, we've got Nuka World. Nuka World is probably the most mixed package out of all the DLCs. Nuka World is carried by its dense and creative theme park worlds and attractions, throwing tons of fun ideas at the player as they explore and secure the 5 parks in Nuka World, and is supplemented with some sweet power armors and fun side quests. However, this DLC is really hurt by its weak story and raider factions, who serve more as decoration rather than actual functional factions, as well as a bit of an over-reliance on tedious collectathon quests that gatekeep some of the more interesting content in this expansion. Don't do it any favors, and put this DLC towards the middle of the pack. In 6th place, we've got The Pit. Albeit surprisingly short, The Pit is a very solid package. The design and atmosphere of The Pit are excellent, creating an extremely filthy, almost hopeless vibe that permeates the entire expansion, which the new items and enemies extend to great effect. The story, although I wish it was a bit deeper, is carefully crafted to really test the player's morals and their choices, and has a compelling conflict at its core. If The Pit was less segmented and had more side content to further develop The Pit and its factions, we could be looking at a top 3 Fallout DLC here. But for now, it nearly falls out. See what I did there? Of the top 5. Now we're in the top 5, and in 5th place, we've got Point Lookout. It's simply just the most complete Fallout 3 DLC package. It's got a fun main quest that kept me engaged throughout, despite it being narratively disappointing. And the new large, spooky beach and swamp areas felt totally unique for the Fallout series, and still do even to this day, which provides a very solid amount of locations to explore and fun side quests to complete, such as the aforementioned Kriv Becknet and Chinese spy side quests. It simply has the most to see and do out of all the Fallout 3 DLCs, and earns its spot here. In 4th place, we've got Lonesome Road. Although Lonesome Road is mostly just a straightforward final combat gauntlet, it's everything around it that makes this DLC. The incredible design and massive destruction of the Divide looks fantastic, and the insane damage and impressive verticality of said destruction of the place really stands out in a game that's completely full of massive destruction. The lore and relationship between the Courier and Ulysses is deep and fascinating, even if Ulysses' vendetta against the Courier is a bit unjustified. And the final confrontation between the two is an excellent send-off to the New Vegas DLC stories, and based on your choices, you can unlock some pretty tough endgame areas to fight through and pilfer, and you can't go wrong with this one, leaving it at 4th place. Moving on to the top 3, and in 3rd place, we've got Dead Shmoney. Although Dead Money's traps, radios, hepatitis clouds, and holograms can devolve into tensionless trial and error puzzles for around 20% of the playtime, 80% of the rest of the DLC is an amazing, wholly unique Fallout gameplay experience. They definitely took a gamble on turning New Vegas into a Bioshock-esque survival horror type experience, and for the most part it paid off. The Sierra Madre has an incredible atmosphere and story, delivering one of the most solemn and engrossing stories in the entire series that people still revere to this day. And that, along with some great companions, writing, and the ingenious let go moment of having to leave most of the gold behind, unless you're an elite gamer, which I apparently am not, combined for an overall fantastic experience. 80% of the time, it works every time. And in 2nd place, the runner-up, we've got Old World Blues. Old World Blues is the most complete New Vegas DLC. It has the best writing and voice acting in all of New Vegas. They were having an absolute blast with it, and it shows. The Big Empty is dense, dangerous, and interesting, with plenty of facilities and interesting locations to explore, bosses to fight, and weapons to scoop up and shoot your scientific abomination ops with. My only issues with this DLC come down to the repetitive school infiltration and stealth suit quests, along with some sometimes overwhelming roving enemy gank squads, especially early on in the DLC when your sonic emitter isn't upgraded. But besides these issues, top to bottom, this DLC is a creative, dense, and incredibly written love letter to classic sci-fi, and my pick for the best New Vegas DLC. In first place in the DLC god of the modern Fallout series, we've got Far Harbor. A Fallout 4 DLC being the best Fallout DLC? It's more likely than you think. Far Harbor takes the top spot for its intricate, player-driven main quest and thick helping of side quests and faction quests, on top of the fairly large and dense island and setting of the coastline of Acadia National Park. Although it may not have writing as good as, say, Dead Money or Old World Blues, the story still works very well, and Dima is probably the most interesting and well-written character in all of Fallout 4, and the choices he forces you to make are genuinely interesting. My only issues with this DLC are that the factions are fairly shallow, and I wish they could have been a bit more unique and deeper and really stand out in the series. That, and the absolute nonsense that is the Dima memory extraction segment of the story. I still have absolutely no clue what they were thinking with that, and it's still one of Todd's most harebrained moves yet. But besides those two issues, Far Harbor is the most complete and complex DLC package, and wins the top spot amongst all the Fallout DLCs. And that's all the Fallout DLCs ranked. Whew. Took a minute, but we finally did it. Damn, that was a hell of a journey, and I thank you all for watching and those who watched. The support I got, especially on the Vegas video, was insane. I never thought so many people would like my content. Definitely more to come. Probably more DLC stuff, but we'll see. And I really hope you enjoyed this video, because I know I enjoyed making it for you guys. So, I'll talk to you soon, and don't scream at me if my opinions are that bad. Just be a little nice, okay? Thanks. Alright, I'll talk to you guys soon. See ya.